Good evening. Call the regular meeting of the Board of Education to order on Wednesday, October 5th at 6:30. The only one that we don't have attending right now is Stephanie Mastriani and Phil Mendolia are not here. Stephanie Mastriani is the only one that's not here. And we also are, before we go into public comment, we do need a motion to move up the student ambassador report to the first thing on the list so they can get over to the bonfire.
I would make a motion to move up the student ambassador report. Do we also want to look to move up the administrators presentation so they can also go there?
They are first on the list.
They are first. Anyway.
Yes.
Okay. So,
However, the dress code discussion, we might want to also move up right after the administrator presentation because the administrators also got to get to the bonfire, so someone's watching the students.
I
Around
think a
the
bunch of
fire.
students and a bunch of fire sounds like no problem whatsoever.
Did you see the size of that?
Um, So let me first then say I'll make a motion to move up the student ambassador report to number 5 in lieu of number 5 and push all the rest of the numbers down
Okay.
and move discussion of dress code 9A up to, can we make it 5A under the presentation?
Sure.
Up to 5A. I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. Great. All right. Do we have any public comment this evening? Not seeing any. I know I'm going quick over that, but see if there's any. You don't see any, do you? Okay. Okay, so welcome Madison and John. Good to see you back. And you guys can go ahead and get started.
I just want to start by saying, this is our first meeting back from the summer, and it's good to be back. Now, for the elementary school, the year is off to a good start. Morning recess is new to the schedule and has been a success. Students love it, and teachers have noticed that the children are much more focused and ready to learn after. Thank you to the Board of Ed and the town for a grant for the new blacktop, and another thank you to the Board of Ed for the new playground equipment that should be installed next month. 6th grade has also started the DARE program and has had 2 sessions. There are also nature walks with Bruce Fellman. 5th graders start the EB program boating for kids, which happened last year as well. Grades K, 1, and 2 have started their Wheeler Library trips, and we are also about to hear about the state test scores. The new program called Into Reading has begun, and there have been professional development days around that, including new materials and professional development over the summer. This is implemented for all K-5 students. Elementary school is now in year 1 of a new math and science curriculum as well. Drama club started and they already have their cast for Frozen. The talent show auditions were yesterday night and the talent show is on December 8th as well. Tomorrow is picture day and Friday is Fall Fest.
So on to high school, there is an EB boat program, which has 6 rotation classes for 10 students. So there's pipe fitting, sheet metal machining, ship fitting, and welding. And these students went with Ms. Tavares through 3 rivers in the Westerly Education Center to go to these classes and choose a specific trade. And a really good example is Cameron Conway. He was one of these students and he chose welding. So he will go through the 250 to 270 hour coursework and be certified for welding right out of high school. He is then also guaranteed an interview at EB. Students in work study are given credit and more pathways are given to our students for more realistic options than just like pushing them to just go to college if that's not where they're at right now or what they are into. There's also an education pathway due to the national teacher shortage. We encourage students to learn at the high school level to help them become interested in continuing at the college level. Ms. St. Germain went to DC over the past few days representing Connecticut as Principal of the Year. She is excited for the amazing opportunity to change what is broken and go over all of her policy ideas to a lobby of senators. Most exciting was Spirit Week last week, along with homecoming. So the days were Holiday Day, Rhyme Without Reason, Barbie and Ken Day, Dress as a Celebrity, and then Color Wars, which is Friday. And Friday is also Wacky Olympics, where we add points from the following days for outfit winners, decide on which grade wins the hallway decorations, and then we play super fun games with the whole school competing grade to grade. And this overall kind of creates an amazing school culture and climate. Kids are excited to be part of their grade and compete with their peers, adding spirit to the school and creating an overall amazing climate to the school's feeling the entire week. And there's also a proposal to work on different wording for the dress code policy as well.
Real quick before we move on, because I know you guys are going to scoot out really quick. Did you have a chance to think about the dress code stuff at all? I know we were looking for a little bit of feedback. Do you have anything you wanted to add before we started discussing that?
I'd say so. Miss Saint Germain showed us the one that the Board of Ed wanted to implement, and I found that the wording was a little odd. I don't understand why we needed to put such like I don't know how to explain like those kind. Guys know what I'm talking about, like such vivid wording. Like it doesn't need to be said, but I feel like what Miss Saint Germain showed us was like a lot better, and she'll obviously talk about it more. But I just felt the wording within it didn't need to be said very much.
John, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I basically agree with it that the wording was not exactly like ideal and that it could definitely.
Thank you. Do we want to go to your presentation first and then go into the dress code, or do you want to do the dress code first? We can do either. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Contemplating changing our dress code policy. So I tried to gather some information for you all to kind of look at before any decisions are made. Most importantly, on the first page, I just want to highlight that we have done a lot of work in the last 10 to 12 years on our dress code. When I arrived at Wheeler, it was like 2.5 pages long, and it had words in it that certainly targeted females. And it was a very punitive code, the way it was written. So I just want to talk a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are today. So we started in 2016 to really look at this. We put together a committee of parents, teachers, students, and we really talked about and surveyed. We spent a year coming and meeting and going through the different survey results and tried to kind of set some goals for ourselves. What did we want to do moving forward with the dress code? We highlighted areas of concern, and then as a group, we met and created a completely new set of regulations at Wheeler. Since then, in 2017, we've made it a point every year to add dress code questions to every survey that we put out there when it comes to our stakeholders, and we take that feedback very seriously. We talk to students all the time. We bring in students that defy our dress code, and we want to have those conversations, and we really try to represent all of our students as much as possible. A couple changes, obviously. COVID made us go look back to our dress code a little bit. We talked about masks, we talked about a lot of things, but we really want you to know that we spend a lot of time thinking about it. I don't want anybody to hear think that we don't. I also included the piercing policy on the first page, just so you know what is in the Board of Ed policy currently that was done in 2007. Very general. I think most of our policies are general, knowing that the regulations that tie to them are where the specifics are going to lie. So I also included on the next page so you can see what is in the Wheeler High School handbook and in the North Stonington Elementary handbook so that you have an idea of what we are actually putting in play for regulation. So I'm not going to read it to you. I know you've seen it a couple of times. We've revised it again. I think every single year we've changed it in some capacity because we're really trying to teach kids. It's not about we're targeting girls, we're targeting boys. In my opinion, and I think Allison would agree, and Rob, it's more about teaching students that there's a time and a place. We talk all the time about
Dress for Success. We actually have it as a spirit day sometimes. And our senior project day, we spend a lot of time talking about being proud of who you are and what you're doing and showcasing that and how you present yourself that day. We talk about it in interviews and that you're not going to wear a bathing suit to an interview, I hope. And we try to teach kids to really think about choices they're making. We have completely taken the punitive piece of dress code away. Right now, Allison and I are the only two people in the building who address dress code. We've taken our staff out of the equation because we don't want to create a climate where kids are uncomfortable and having conversations in front of other students. So we have those conversations privately and in a non-punitive way. And really the goal is to talk to kids and try to get them to understand what our goal is and why we do have the regulations in place that we have. The next page is Rob's from his handbook. And I know he updates it as well. When he came on at Wheeler, I mean, at North Stony Elementary, I think there were some things in his dress code policy that you guys have made reference to about makeup and about things that clearly did not really belong in the dress code. And Rob made those revisions. Last couple pages we put together are options that we're hoping you consider. There's two options here that we have actually worked on over the summer and early in the school year. So I put them back on the table because I know there's a third option out there, which is obviously fine, but I just wanted to make sure you saw the original ones that we developed. I think the big thing and takeaway I want you to know is they're still pretty general. I think the regulations are where we come into play and we create regulations that match the needs of our school. We have woodshop class, we have chemical labs, we have a lot of things that we're taking into consideration that might be different than what Rob is, and you'll see that reflected in both options. Honestly, I don't have a preference. The first one is from CABE. We worked with Troy on this one at the very end of summer. The second one was just taking that first original one and making it a little bit more up to date. And then last, I guess I just want to share, it's really important to us that we don't make this policy so specific that we cannot manage it as administrators. I mean, right now we're spending a lot of time with kids and supporting students for a variety of other reasons. And I think putting that much specific language into a policy means that we're either going to make this a full-time job to really make sure we're executing our policies the way we say. So we're hoping you can take that into consideration. And then I know a couple of times there's been conversations at meetings where we've talked about makeup and we've talked about things that are actually not in the regulations. And I just want to stress how important it is that I wish you would talk to us because we will talk to any of you about what's happening in our schools. And that just keeping the specifics under the regulations allows us to continue to work on them. It allows us to talk about them, it allows us to change them as necessary. If you make it a policy, we got to go back to the table. This goes up to a Board of Ed meeting. It takes a lot more time. So we're hoping that you can trust us enough to know that the changes that we're putting in the regulations are for the reasons we say and not to punish anybody for their attire. And then last, I just want you to take into consideration, we have a lot of things that we want to make sure kids are safe. You know, dressing for PE and sneakers and being around stoves in a life skills class or whatever that means. We just want to make sure that kids are dressed appropriately and safe. So I think that's it. Covered everything. Did you want to? You good? Yeah. Any questions?
All right. All right. Does anybody have any questions or any discussion we'd like to have, knowing that the admins will be popping out when we have our deeper discussions? So if you guys have some things you'd like to address now, I think they'd like to hear from us as to what our concerns might be.
I do. You mentioned the regulation, and I missed the last meeting, and I haven't watched it. I'm just going to admit it. I didn't watch it yet. And so I'm not sure what that conversation looked like, but I can speak to my own concerns prior to that last meeting. And that's that I know that you guys spend a lot of time on this, and Allison and I spent a significant amount of time on the phone one day discussing it as well. And so I understand that you all also have to look at it through a different lens than I do as a board member or as a parent. But with that being said, I hate the dress code. I really like the dress code that Brian came up with. And I know that in general, I'm sort of with you guys in terms of the policy versus regulation. You set the regulation, let the regulation support the policy, but let that be sort of those everyday specifics. That's what you're handling. My concern about the regulation is that I don't like the interpretation of the policy. And so I wanted our policy to reflect the way that that I felt and the way that I think a few other board members felt about the dress code and how seriously I felt about the messages that it was sending. And so I don't mind the language in either of these policies that you submitted to us for consideration, but I would love to see the accompanying regulation to say, okay, I feel really comfortable that the administrators got what we were saying and they're weaving that into their regulations, or to say, I just think we're on two different pages and I prefer our policy. Do you have those regulations?
But they are on the second page. It says they're updated yearly, so this would be the most recent one that's
So
in
this
the
is the
handbook.
most recent one?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I thought that that was,
the second page is the
yeah,
regulation.
I'm sorry, I thought this was still, I thought this was old, so I don't like the regulation. I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with it.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what parts you don't like so that they maybe can work on that?
Sure, I think they know because it sounds like they've been listening to our conversations, but I'm 1,000% with you on the safety stuff. I mean, appropriate footwear, headwear, eye protection, all those things. I don't want to use words like provide appropriate coverage. Number one, I think that's incredibly objective. And number two, I'm not sure that my definition of that might be the same as an administrator. I don't want to talk about appropriate coverage in our dress code. I don't want to talk about torsos. I don't. I'm happy to talk about safety. I'm happy to talk about bigotry, hate, violence, illegal activities. I'm totally comfortable with that. I don't want to talk about the body stuff in our dress code.
Policy specifically talks about the body stuff. So do you want to remove it from the policy or just have it in, which section do you want it in?
Which one? The one that I've submitted is not in here. And here's the thing with the one that I submitted, and I had a discussion with Chet about this, and mine looks more like a CABE regulation than it does an actual policy. And there are things I think within what I crafted that could be put into policy, which would be fine. But I think there needs to be some level of taking out some ambiguity. Again, I'm with Stephanie on this, those words like appropriate. That is a highly subjective word. I don't want to have subjectivity in something that we're using, because what might be appropriate for one student might not be for another. What's appropriate for one household might not be for another. So I want to make sure that whatever policy we ultimately choose here, it takes subjectivity out of here. It needs to be as close to objective as humanly possible with regard to one of these policies. And then the regulation can be built off of that. And again, I have no problem to create a policy that can be supported by your regulations, but I think those regulations then need to be a true reflection of that lack of subjectivity. And I know that there was specific language in there because that specific language was to what explicitly needed to be covered.
Well, and I do believe that we are not the same as all districts in the idea that our board doesn't approve regulations, whereas many boards do. And we've taken almost all of the control of those day-to-day aspects out of the hands of the board and put it into administrators. And I think that that was a demonstration of us showing that we very much trust that our administrators are doing the things that are within our policy and are creating regulations to do so. I think that the difficulty here was that there was some concern that that wasn't following through with that. And therefore that vague policy that we gives all of that freedom away from that. But it's not necessarily, again, it's not the way that other boards handle that in these situations. Many of them have the entirety of those regulations for every policy written directly into the policy manual, and we've avoided that. And I think that the reason this one came up was because there were concerns with that idea, again, that the policy should be the governing piece of that. And if there's difficulty in terms of the regulation piece, it should be something that can be policed from a board level. Not necessarily in a way that we're saying this has to be piece by piece every way we're going. And I don't think we're going back in that direction across the board. I think this was a hot button issue that the board was looking to exert a bit more control with, but still not necessarily the control of taking into play, this has to be the regulation, but rather these are the specifics that we want to make sure are included within the regulation. And I would,
I just got a text that we're having this whole conversation
Yeah,
and
and
you're
can't be
sitting in
heard.
the audience and nobody
Yeah,
can hear you
I was
online.
thinking the
I'm
same
so
thing.
sorry. I didn't,
Can you just grab the mic
yeah.
when you're speaking? You can hold
Sorry.
it if it's easier. Just
Well,
because the
and-
people at home can't hear us.
and I guess I would just say the other piece of it is the time. I mean, 2017 doesn't sound that long ago, but I mean, it was
6
only 2014 that my school started allowing leggings without it being entirely covered like to the knees, right? Like the speed at which dress code changes and what's perceived as socially acceptable changes is incredible.
Which
And-
means we'll be updating our policy frequently as well if we get into specifics.
See, but I don't know, like, to me, I guess.
Well, we'll discuss that. I think at this point, the board will discuss which direction they want to go. My hope is that, you heard Stephanie's concern about using words like appropriate, things like that. We can certainly also address just the regulation piece on just removing some of those wording to make it a little more appropriate. Just to make it a little more acceptable as well. So sometimes it isn't just throwing completely out the policy, but maybe reworking a little bit, knowing we could rework the regulation to address some of those issues. And maybe it's more the regulation that the issue is with than it is the actual policy. So we'll have those discussions. We'll let you know where we end, and then we can certainly continue the conversation to give you the feedback on how does that look to fit a regulation. Does that make sense? Okay, so we will pick this back up on our agenda tonight, but I would like you guys to be able to move into your report out on statistics before you have to head across the street.
And students, if you need to go to your bonfire, you can go.
that better? Good? All right. So, yeah, that's it. So in case you missed it, third grade math, #1 in the state. All right, that's good. Thank you. All right, that's the highlight. And here we see our fifth and our sixth grade scores to include our NGSS science. Again, those are against the 12 others and the state. We're very proud of how our kids performed, that we are no less than third in any one particular area, and that we were first in 1/3 of all the tests that we have the results for. So our kids did a great job.
I'm gonna switch it. Okay. So this is our 7th and 8th grade right here, SBAC. Our 7th grade, so last year's 7th graders, I put at the bottom 20th in the state out of 175, which was wonderful. And just want to highlight that last year, I'll talk about our new math program, but the 7th grade teacher last year implemented it and piloted the new program. So that's interesting. We did very well. And she was using it before we used it across the board for all of our 7th and 8th grade classes. But she used it in her group last year, and it paid off, did very well. These are all towns we always compare ourselves to, ECC and our DIRT. So that's really what's pulled here. Obviously, the ones in the bottom are too small to have that data suppressed. They just keep it on there. And then go ahead, the next slide just includes our NGSS for 8th and 11th. And then our SAT, what's wrong? Pause. No. Pause. Pause. Oh. They see
That one right there?
or that, or just they got that. We're good. Okay. So that's our 7th and 8th. The next slide has our NGSS and our SAT data. Next to, so for the SAT, that's the percent that achieved a 3 or 4. And then to the right is the average score for ELA and for math for each of the towns. NGSS, 8th grade, was first compared to all these towns. We typically do very well in both of those, both NGSS 8th grade and 11th grade.
So here we look at our cohort data, and this is basically when we look at track one class as they progress through the years. And, you know, really looking at through the past years, our biggest consistency is inconsistency, and that's what we see. We see some cohorts achieve better at different grade levels. Some do better when they go from 3rd to 4th math. Some do better when they go from 5th to 6th math or ELA. So it really doesn't paint a clear picture for us as to why that is. I do know, like at the state level, we do see a lot that the level cohorts of their percentage really remains for the most part consistent, but we do tend to see drops from 5 to 6 in ELA and from 4 to 5 in math. That seems to be statewide. It could be test related, but what we all know is that, as well as that, just being such a small district, 1 or 2 students can account for 5% to 7% of a grade level. So if we have 1 or 2 students kind of fall out, or if they've moved away, or if we've added some students that aren't performing as well, that can affect our percentages.
Hey,
But it
Rob,
really,
can I just because I know that this always confuses me a little bit when it comes to cohort
Yep.
data. Each of the expectations as you move from grade to grade are different, though. It's not, so they're increasing at the same speed, which means if we're maintaining steady, it means we're keeping a consistent group of kids who are consistently doing well.
right.
It doesn't make sense to always look and expect that somebody's going to jump 2 grade levels as we move forward. So I just want to make that clear, because I know it always throws me off when I look at the numbers.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Chad. And then just finally, so this really speaks to our need to look at our growth data, which we will be talking about in a few more slides. And that has a lot more value to us as administrators and as teachers.
Same idea, talk about the size, but I also just want to share. So when we look at this, which we sit down grade level and look at this, we then break down student level data. So our data teams that meet every other week right now. So we'll look with our math interventionists, our seventh grade math teacher, we'll all come together and we look at this, but then we'll look at student data, their SBAC, their STAR that they took already once this year, and look at individual students. And then also see if we didn't go from a 3 to a 4, did we, the growth data, did we increase in the actual scale score? So that's on each spreadsheet as well. Same idea, some of our math increasing, if we really break this down, but same idea, inconsistent across the board. Based on, our size. And we do see a big difference in the number of eighth graders. So we have some that have left, we have some that join us. So appears we're looking at the same group, but once we break that down, there really are, many changes in there.
Okay, so here we take a look at our fitness data, and we know that this is definitely an area that we need to focus on as a school. So you can see our fourth graders have gone up slightly in the percentage of who are passing all the tests. We've had a little bit more growth, successful growth with our sixth graders. As we look at the data, some of them do very well in a lot of the assessments, but the mile run seems to be the one that hangs us up a lot. So we will I'll talk about some of the things that we're trying to do to help increase this physical fitness data, but we know this is an area that we need to focus on and to improve it.
And honestly, we were very happy with this. Beginning of the year, I met with the PE teachers to really break this down with them. If you look post-COVID, overall, the percentage of students that are meeting that, are pretty high, doing well. What we did in COVID when we went to our block schedule, they use that 88-minute. They take at least 15 to 20 minutes to do fitness every day. So every PE period, they're doing the sit-up, the push-up, and either the pacer or a couple laps outside. So, and that breaks up the block for students. They complain, but they seem to like it overall. It's fitness every day. The test happens in 8th grade and in 10th grade. And they do the mile run as the test, but they still do the pacer in the gym when they don't go outside, just as the activity when they do the fitness. So they'll do the pacer, but the actual test that we submit is the mile run to the state. They do that in October for all of our fall classes, and then they'll do it in April for our second semester classes. But they've worked hard on this. So after each one is the state average, and continue to meet to just change that 20-minute fitness. What can we do with that? The kids keep a card, they keep track of how many they're getting each class period. And the students are, from beginning of PE class to the end, hoping to improve number of sit-ups, number of push-ups that they're getting done. So.
She does the mile.
Our AP data changes cohort to cohort. I just want to highlight this work that our school counseling office has really done. There is data out there that talks about how important it is for students to kind of be able to take AP ECE opportunities at the high school level. There's a real correlation to their success in college. So every year College Board does what they call an AP report card. Are we giving access to more students to these AP classes, whether or not they get the credit, the 3, the 4, the 5 on the exam? There's 2 areas on the accountability index that we're actually measured on. And yes, one is how many actually got the college credit. And the other is how many are taking AP courses in the high school level. And there's really a huge correlation of success between students who are never in an AP class and they go to college and they struggle versus students who have navigated an AP course and really learn those skills and the rigor that is going to be following them when they go on to college. So this year we were actually awarded the Bronze Award for that opportunity of getting more students access into AP classes and ECE classes. So we're working really hard to expose students to this, whether it's challenging. I think it's important that they be in there and they see how they can do before they take that next leap to the post high school.
Okay, so just real quick, this is just a slide about the growth model in the state of Connecticut. And what you can see here is that they take each level and they break it down into a low and a high range. And depending on the level that you're in dictates what your growth target is. So you can see it in that little highlighted one there. So if you finished in third grade as a high 1, they would expect you to make 71 points of your raw score growth. The idea is that if you're able to hit those targets, you'll proceed through each line as you continue to go forward. So you might go from a high 1 to a low 2 to then to a high 2 and then to a low 3. And the idea is that eventually you will get up to that level 3-4 range if you keep hitting those growth targets. This is actually a standard growth model. It's not a value added one. So it doesn't take into consideration any programming, teachers, socioeconomic status, anything. It's a straight, if this is where you are, this is where we want, this is how many points we want you to get. Again, and the idea is just keep the students, if we hit those targets, our students will keep growing and moving forward. Next slide, Chad. So here's the growth data for all of North Stonington here. And the growth data that we have, there's 2 measures here. That first one, the growth rate, that's just a binary. It's a yes or a no. So the percentages that you see are, did the students hit their target? Yes or no. There's no credit given for if they almost achieved it, if they got any growth at all. That's nothing. It's just, so if you look at that first line in 4 ELA, 50% of the kids hit their growth target, 50% did not. The second measure measures how much of their target was achieved. So it gives students credits for achieving parts of their credits, part of their growth target. So they might have grown 20%, or they got 30 points out of the 60 they were supposed to get. So they get credit for that. And you can see like that number, the difference there is 77% of our total growth targets were actually achieved. This is the info that we find that's most helpful to us. And what we'll do with this is, and we've started to do this now, is we drill down to the individual student level at this point. So now we can see, all right, I have these students here. Did they hit their growth targets? And what we do at my building is roughly around the average for elementary school is about 40 points. So 40 points is, if you grow usually less than 40 points, you could actually backslide a level. You could go from a high 2 to a low 1. So 40 points is kind of that break point roughly. So we highlight everybody in red who's not hit that 40-point mark. And then we're able to pinpoint what's the reason for it. Are they students who are in a particular class? Is it because of, students who are, maybe in level 3s and level 4s? Are we not getting those students enough? Is it our levels 1s and our level 2s who aren't growing? So we're able to really drill down to find the reasons why students are not growing. And then we can put plans in place to help them to move forward so that they hit the growth target next year around. And then, so moving forward, so based on everything that we've looked at here, some of the things that we're doing to help address our needs. So we've started our inter-reading program, which the board approved last spring. This is K through grade 5. Our grade 6 teacher is working with Kim Haggerty at the middle school level to find out what's going to work best for her. She's still piloting some things. The nice thing about this is it does incorporate the tenets of science of reading, which is really the big push nowadays. That's really how we want teachers teaching, is to use the science of reading for that. One of the things that we purchased was a growth measure assessment, and this is taking the place of our ELA STAR test. And this correlates right in with the inter-reading program, and it also correlates with the Waggle computer program, which I have listed up there. We've also purchased that as well. And what that does, it'll take the students' growth measure. So all of our students took the growth measure in the fall, and now teachers are able to assign content to them based on their level, based on what that test has shown. And the Waggle computer adapts. And so as the students progress forward, the program allows them to just keep moving forward and keeps challenging them. We also have an opera grant, which we've used. We've bought some additional materials for teachers who requested it through the inter-reading program. And we're also able to purchase some additional professional development. We're implementing a new intervention model at the elementary level this year. And what we're doing is, with all of our K1, 2, and 3 levels, is we've given them a specified intervention block, and we're putting in the teacher, a reading interventionist, and a paraprofessional into all those classrooms for that 30 to 40-minute block, depending on what grade level they're in. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to hit our students hard and early so that we can really cut down the number of our students who need tier 2 and tier 3 support when they get up into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We want to make sure that we have as few numbers as possible of students that are on that support level when they get up into that 5th, 6th grade range. Hopefully they've either been identified as special ed, or we've been able to work them off of the supports that they need. So that's the idea behind that model that we're doing this year. And that was one that we picked up from a district in the area that we went to go visit when we were looking at the inter-reading program. So it was a nice little payoff for that. Our math and science curriculum work as John had mentioned, is in our year one this year. So right now we're looking at our materials, looking what else is out there. What do we need? What do we have? What can we do to make it better? That's really what year one is all about. We are piloting a new math program. We had mentioned that in sixth grade, but I also have my fourth grade math teacher is doing the same program at the elementary level. So far, the feedback has been positive. We're seeing more student engagement with it. He enjoys the program, and it's a problem-based curriculum. So it really, as opposed to just seeing a concept and then practicing it, it gives the students a problem, and they attempt to solve it within their groups, and then the concepts kind of come out of that. So it's really, the concepts before the conventions. And then we're still doing our PD around our mathematical practices. I have like 2 math interventionists right now. We're down to NCTM in DC. Hopefully we're going to pull back some good things from that. I had my whole 3rd grade and one of my math interventionists went to the Greg Tang workshop in Boston. He's really on the forefront of different ways of thinking about math and making it more engaging. He actually has a curriculum out, so we might do some piloting of that as well. Something else that we're doing this year now is peer observation. I've been encouraging my staff for years to get out and see what your fellow teachers are doing, how they're running their classrooms. It could be about behavior management, it could be about social emotional learning, it could be about lesson implementation, whatever it is that you want to see. So we've actually made that part of their goal this year. So all teachers will have to go out and observe a peer at least twice over the course of the year. We've added the additional recess for all grade levels, which has been well received, definitely. And I know Ms. Perkins is also, she does similar now to the high school. So when the kids start their PE class, they start by doing laps, and they start with stretching, and then they do some different strength building exercises. And of course, she has a little dice that she rolls, and they have to do 20 push-ups or 10 burpees or something like that. And then before they get into their max. So we are trying to address those physical fitness issues as well. And Ms. Perkins is also working on our health curriculum. That's in year 2. And finally, our STEAM initiatives that we're doing to really kind of keep on that forefront of innovative practices. Our STEAM team has done a great job. We did a STEAM career day, which was very well received. We invited parents and family members in. They kind of talked about what their jobs are and how they relate to science and technology, trying to just generate more interest for the students. We have our robotics, our Legos that the board has purchased for us. Mrs. Shah is getting that in all the hands of the students, and they're really having a lot of fun in that library time. So those are the things that we're doing to address what we feel are our weaker areas. And then again, we'll start with our PD day on the 1st, and we'll be looking into that growth data and seeing what we can do to start addressing some of those needs.
So, and on our end, so the new math program that I talked about quickly. So last year, Kim McKay, now Kim Van Horn, had piloted the program, and now we are using it across the board. So 7th, 8th grade and Algebra 1. And we're planning on using Desmos for geometry and Algebra 2 once it comes out. And she's also working so she goes down, works with the 6th grade teacher. She's our math program supervisor. So she's meeting with them, kind of reflecting on it, making sure that any questions they have, sharing, what they're finding with the program. But so far, really positive. Students are very engaged. Same idea, problem-solving approach. They get to work, and then, the concepts come after. Kind of the note piece comes after the students have worked through on their Chromebook, some activity that they're working together or alone. The accelerated math. So last year we had made this change. We're identifying students now in 6th grade. So from 5th to 6th grade instead of 6th to 7th grade, it just aligns better to the standards. And now we're covering, so in 6th grade, she's covering all of 6th grade plus half of 7th. And then we're covering half of 7th and 8th grade instead of what we were doing is 2 in 1 grade, which was very difficult. So they had double block of math and everyday math for 88 minutes. Now we've kind of made that change first time this year. So that's been helpful. And then it gives more intervention time for those students to have that extra math at our level. We continue to focus on instructional strategies and formative assessment in our building. That's our school-wide goal. That's what when teachers meet for common plan and for team led by program supervisors, we're really looking at what strategies are we using? Are they innovative? Are we sharing? What are we bringing back? When we go to PD, that's the focus in our entire school with across all departments. And curriculum coordinator, so Kim Haggerty is now going in and supporting this work. So she's meeting with each department during common plan. She's meeting with the team members to help support that within the curriculum writing, but all the instructional strategies that are in the curriculum, she's there to support that.
And it's all connected. Our vision of the graduate, obviously curriculum is a huge piece and component of that. The work Kim is doing it goes beyond the curriculum. She's meeting with teachers. She's talking about instructional practice. So all of this aligns to that vision of our graduate at Wheeler and what we hope our kids have when they leave us, so that whatever it is that they decide to do after Wheeler, that they are ready for whatever that looks like. We also do peer observations. We really try to encourage staff to get into each other's classes. We have great things happening, and we want, PD is great, but we actually have a lot of great PD within our own building. Our curriculum coordinator position, I want to thank you guys for that. I can't tell you how much it has done for all four of us as far as unifying our building and getting that pre-K 12 experience really aligned instead of being that school and this school. We now actually have this nice transition for students who go through the school. And Kim is amazing. She's teaching, she's working with teachers, she's working on curriculum documents, she's supporting staff. So it's really been a nice addition to our school system. And again, that K-12 professional development, when I was in DC, we literally had to stop what we were doing because up on Capitol Hill, they were about to cut the Title II funding, which is all of our professional development in all of our schools in the nation. So we literally stopped. We sent text messages to senators. We talked about the importance of that Title II funding and Title IV. So they're cutting two areas of a budget that will devastate public school. So it's awesome that you guys are supporting PD. We have teachers. Janet just returned from the Colt conference, and they're taking advantage of those opportunities and they're bringing them back to the classroom, which I think is the best training out there. So we'll continue to fight, obviously, the Washington, D.C. problem, and hopefully those cuts don't happen. But in the meantime, we're grateful for the opportunities that you have given our kids. So thank you.
I have one really quick question. It's kind of off topic. Now with the SAT, do you can see that continuing to be a player in, just because my own personal experience is just not required in so many of the applications, and a lot of them won't even look at it if you do put it in.
Is what
The
required?
SAT, the ACT, the
I'm telling you, I've
SAT.
been the counselor for the last month at Wheeler because our counselors had babies or on medical leave. So I've gotten a lot of taste of what's happening. It's crazy. Colleges are really looking at a holistic approach
Right.
to what students are going to bring. You can put your SAT scores up there, but most of them that I'm seeing, they're optional. Rank's gone. There's so many different factors that
Right.
have, when we applied to college that were there that don't exist anymore. They really are concerned with the number of freshmen who don't stay in college.
Yeah.
The number of kids who go is one statistic, but the other statistic we don't talk about, how many actually stay the course and stay in school. So I think a lot of
That's it.
changes will keep
But
happening.
at
Yep.
the state level, that is the 11th grade test that all 11th graders need to take,
Right.
regardless what we're using it for. That's our measure that we're using right? So we continue to use the PSAT to that's our data too in high school
Sure,
right
sure.
now. So middle school, we have our STAR, we have our SBAC. Now for 9th, 10th, 11th grade, we use that PSAT. And all 11th graders take it, but college-wise shifting a little
Yeah.
bit.
And kids care. They do.
Yeah.
I see a change there.
Yeah.
Kids really care. I ask every student I'm meeting with, how are your scores? How do you feel? Well, they could be better. I want to do better. So they still care regardless
Sure.
if it's optional.
Okay. I was just curious if you
No,
had
they care.
heard any dialogue on that. Any other questions before we let the admins head out?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Just because I'm not familiar, it's the list that you put up here for the AP. Is that the only classes that you offer, or
Yeah.
are those are the only? Are you
Yes.
ever going to expand into the STEM realm?
We have expanded and added. We also have ECE opportunities that are not up there as well, and VHS AP opportunities too. So yeah. Yep.
Every other, so AP Bio is every other. So now we have them on a rotating so that we don't have two every year. So now those students can take, they know AP Bio is going to be offered their sophomore and senior year. They know, so the history we do that with as well, just to try to allow for students to take more and it not to be one kid one year and two of the next.
No, that
So
makes
there's some we offer every year. There's some we have a rotating and the kids know that what year that they need to take them if they're going to take them. Yeah.
Just for the record, how many ECE courses are there?
How many what?
ECE courses do we have?
I think 3 currently. We did have AP Psych was an additional one that we added last year. So.
And some of the ECE is to be a certified instructor. It's very challenging. So some that were certified instructors and then based on who's teaching the class, AP, it's much easier for a teacher to be an AP teacher. ECE, you need to have, so to teach an ECE math class, you have to have a math degree. To teach an ECE, yeah, so some of it is just having a certified person and then deciding what fits better. Should we offer both? Sometimes we offer AP and ECE, and the students can use, either.
And just a question, 'cause it's
Yeah.
been a while since I looked at ECE. Is it not just a degree in that discipline, but also a master's in it as well? Because I remember at one point, I know UConn and Eastern, if you wanted ECE credit through them,
Math was master, math.
you had to have a
math.
master's
It's all a master's degree in the subject.
in the
yeah.
subject, yeah,
Not in education.
not in
subject.
education, correct? So it makes it even more difficult.
And kids can only select one. So if they're doing an ECE and an AP in the same content area, only one can go towards. So there's a lot of like things about it that kids know. And when they make their choices, that's based on a lot of that.
I just had two quick questions, mostly for Rob. Math Star, because you said you're moving to the waggle option was what they're moving for progress monitoring for reading at the elementary school, right?
Yeah.
But math is still using the star
Yep.
as their main point. Are teachers liking using star for math as that aspect? Do you know, as have there been complaints about that, or do teachers tend to like the math star as the option?
Yeah, I teachers do tend to like the star. I haven't really heard any complaints about it. And the real reason why we wanted to switch to the waggle was because it tied into the growth measure assessment. So that was kind of our reason behind it. Growth measure does offer a mathematics test, so we could look at that once we get into our curriculum work, and if we find that we want to make that move, we could. But yeah, most people are in favor. I always like the NWEA test better, but everybody here likes star, so I'm gonna stay with it.
I'm personally not a big fan of star, but that's
okay.
okay. Sorry. I do have ulterior motive to that, but I also was curious with the high scores that happened, especially with the exceeds level at the math in the third grade. Is the growth progress number going forward going to be difficult to maintain? Are we going to start seeing issues with, if to hit exceeds, you've only got about another 150 points you can even grow, and if 70 is what you're looking for, at least 40 even,
Yeah.
is that going to be a struggle that we're going to see in the future
The-
scoring of that?
It's a great question. It would be tough to think that they're going to pull another 90% coming out of fourth grade, but it would be great if they could. But yeah, so, and that's one of the things that we look at with the growth data. So once they do take that fourth grade test, we'll know more. We do hope that they're going to continue to achieve, and we're hoping that this new program that we put in fourth grade, one of the reasons why we chose fourth grade is because the students did perform so well on the SBAC that we thought that this is a group that could maybe try this kind of a switch, this problem-based learning, because they had so many of those foundational skills solid. It'll be interesting to see, but we are always concerned with those higher level, the 3s and 4s. We're always addressing our 1s and our 2 scores, right? We're always trying to intervene with the kids. We have our eyes on the kids we know that are struggling. We try to provide them as much intervention, as much support as we can. But we need to make sure that those 3s and 4s don't just kind of fall by the wayside and don't keep achieving. So I imagine next year it might be a different look for that, although I hope not.
Thank you guys for all the incredible work that you're doing in the school. I know that we always talk about like, how great it is, but this presentation was incredibly helpful for me to understand when you come and ask us to do stuff, what that actually means as a non-educator. Sometimes I just say, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but this is really helpful to see not only what you're using it for, but what the result is, and then what you're doing with that data. So thank you for the presentation. It was really helpful for me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, great information as always. Thank you for coming out tonight. Have fun. Roast some marshmallows. Okay, so that's it for presentations. We'll come back to the policy work when we get down to that. Let's move into the approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the August 9th, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
I second it.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain?
Also make a motion to approve the August 23rd, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
I'll second that. I was gonna hold off on second. Do you want second, Brian?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain. And Chet abstained on that for your notes. It was seconded by Brian. Any correspondence? Okay. And that brings us up to the superintendent report.
Okay, so my report was in the packet, and I'm just gonna review what's there. In terms of staffing updates, as you may know, and you may have heard Mrs. St. Germain just state about the school counseling department has been challenged with personnel issues, and different staff have been trying to pick up the slack, including the administrators. Hopefully getting the job done well enough. We've actually interviewed the long-term sub, but we have not been able to lock anybody in. But we do have an ad out there, and we're continuing to do that. So it's a hard thing to do in the middle of the year. We hope that our counseling department will be whole soon, though, with returning staff. Recently, a paraprofessional had resigned. Just another update. I participated in a drill at the fire department with fire personnel, ambulance, emergency director, Gary Barron, Bob Carlson for selectmen. And it was really a state kind of wide drill that they would give information to you throughout the morning, and then you would talk about how you're going to respond. This one had to do with a chemical spill on Route 2 that would potentially, if you breathe it, you could get ill or die. And so we talked through that scenario, whether we were going to evacuate the school or shelter in place, how we would evacuate the school if we were going to do that. So it was really good discussion. And it's just basically a test of your kind of emergency plans and the flexibility of the plan. So it was, we all felt it was worthwhile drill and discussion. We did kind of identify, we may want to more clearly describe our evacuation routes from the school, whether it's by transport on bus or, on foot. And so we could probably do that and let the emergency personnel know what it is. So if we had to communicate during a situation, we all know what the possible plans are, depending on the situation. We do have the installation of the ticket windows in the vestibule scheduled. That should be happening very soon. The gym floor be refinished on November 1st at Wheeler. So a lot of things will be happening. I think the month of November will be very productive, and there's some other things further down the list. I really encourage you to listen to this link. Kristen did an interview, being, high school principal of the year. There's a podcast, and it's really worthwhile listening to it. She did a great job, very articulate. It's definitely worth a listen. She talks about innovative instruction, AI, and all of those things that are relevant to education today. As you know, she was in Washington, D.C. just a few days ago representing Connecticut. I think it was a really valuable experience for her, professional development, networking, meeting people from all over the country. And I think that kind of experience is reassuring and validating to the work that you're doing in your own district. And you realize a lot of people are working on the same things from wherever they are. The STEM day at Career Day at the elementary school, Rob mentioned it, was awesome. I went there and I met many of the parents and community members who were presenting. I think it was really worthwhile. I think it's something that's probably going to continue to help kids understand how what they're learning is applicable in the real world in terms of a possible career, some careers that they never would have thought of. So I think it's really valuable. I'm so glad that happened. Right now, Rob mentioned there's 2 teachers down in Baltimore at the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Conference. It's awesome to have that. We just went, Janet was at the Colt Conference just recently. I also am participating in a superintendent discussion through Learn and EastCon. It's virtual, but I've attended 2 meetings now, and we kind of talk about leading for innovation. So it's good to hear what other superintendents are doing to support innovative instruction in their districts and share ideas. Our PDAC committee, that's our professional development committee and evaluation committee, will be meeting soon to discuss the new evaluation guidelines. Every district in the state has to come up with a new plan based on new guidelines for evaluating teachers and administrators. And we need to start working on that. The state's supposed to come out with like some examples of what would meet the criteria, and we were kind of waiting for those examples to come out, but they haven't really come out, so we got to get working on it anyway. So we're ready, and you guys, by the way, have to approve it before the end of the year. So it's got to be Board of Ed approved. So we're working.
Which year?
Begin this year.
Like
No,
23 or
no,
June of
24.
24?
24, June.
Okay.
Yeah, May, June of 24, you approve it, we're good to go. But hopefully, the PDAC committee will be, be very transparent in the work, and people will kind of know when it's going to be. And hopefully you guys just will, agree like with the committee came up with is the way to go. Developing we're working, I'm actually met with the teachers union a couple times, the representatives and administrators. They talk about a way to support teachers in their classroom and to get the superintendent in the classrooms more, and to do it in a way that's not evaluative, but it's just in a supporting way. But the teachers were kind of thinking they want some kind of feedback, even though it's not evaluative. So we're trying to like weigh that. How do you do that and not make it evaluative? So we might come up with some kind of like exit ticket and a checklist, like, we saw these things or something. And it was like a sticker for the teacher, that they collected. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but the PDAC committee may work on that as well. So it's, the teachers really developing this, what they want. Infield work on the baseball, softball field's been scheduled. It's supposed to happen soon. One of the issues with all these people that you contract with to do the work is they're busy. They have other jobs, and you get on their list. So we're promised it will be done. So soon. Same with the playground equipment installation and more wood chips. Okay, so we're next on the list with the vendor. In terms of understanding the whole building project and where we are and with the documents, okay, we've made tremendous progress with that. We actually have found a flash drive that neither of the 2 past facilities directors seem to know about. Okay, but our current director found a flash drive, and it has documents. We also, but it's tough. I mean, it's a busy job, right? And to find that, we went through a lot of things. We were told there's a single binder somewhere. We don't believe there's a single binder anywhere, but there was a flash drive that we found recently. We also have someone from Downs Construction meeting with us Friday morning. This has been rescheduled twice now, but Friday at 2:30. Person is coming, and they're supposed to also come with a flash drive. And we figure we're just gonna make some copies of that flash drive, give one to the town hall, have one in the central office.
And our flash drive works. You checked it, it's not corrupted or anything, because those flash drives only last a couple years.
Well, that's why we're gonna make some copies. But yes, we did. We looked at it, we opened it, we saw the documents, and it has all the closing documents of the building project, the warranties, which most have expired. Most were like 1-year warranties. It really depends on what you're talking about or what part of what you're talking about. And yeah, it looks like the roof is still under warranty. Okay, the major thing. But a lot of other things have expired, but we're gonna hopefully compiled a list of what the warranties were, which is expired when, and what is still valid. Okay, so we'll continue to work on that. We scheduled the upgrade of the HVAC software, and that brings me to a request Do you remember how you voted to spend up to $28,000 on non-lapsing fund to support professional development for innovative instruction? Remember that? Okay. So we thought it might be difficult with the town and how they have to cut the checks out of the non-lapsing fund. And we learned, yes, it actually is difficult. And the most difficult part is when we say to a teacher, you got to put the registration of this conference on your personal credit card and then give the receipt to the business office so the receipt can give it to the town so they can reimburse you directly because they won't reimburse the Board of Ed. Because they can't, I guess, the way it works. So we can, if a teacher flies somewhere or stays at a hotel, they usually, it's common practice, they make their reservation, they keep the receipts, and they submit for reimbursement. And that's rare. Most teachers are just paying registration to go to a conference. Okay. So I think that part, if someone flies and stays somewhere, that could still be from the reimbursed from non-lapsing. We get the receipts through the town hall and they cut the check to reimburse. I think that part's fine. But to tell a teacher, yeah, you're going to register this as $160 registration fee, put on your personal credit card, don't worry, you're going to get reimbursed. It doesn't support them really going. It makes them nervous. They shouldn't have to put it on their personal card. So what I would like to do is find money in the regular Board of Ed budget to say, okay, we're going to allocate this money for registration for conferences to support innovative instruction. And you're going to then possibly vote to pay for the software upgrade for the HVAC system through non-lapsing, basically freeing up the money from our general building services line to pay the registration. And so the quote we have is $15,429 for the upgrade of the software for the HVAC system. So maybe if you wanted to take action on that, maybe someone would have to vote to put it on the agenda.
Can I ask just quick first, so we can't do a PO through the non-lapsing? Is that
No.
basically how
No,
it works?
that's
There
right.
is no PO through the non-lapsing.
Right.
That's right.
So for this year only, for this innovative instruction, because we really, our goal is to move that into the budget, right, moving forward. So it would be for this year only. We're looking at, we were going to pay for the HVAC software. This is just so I have it clear in my head, through the regular budget.
Yep.
Under line item,
That's general building
the
services.
general building
There's about
services.
$125,000 in that line.
All right, and we have enough in that line to cover that HVAC software, we think? All right, so we would just be moving that to non-lapsing, freeing up that money to help pay for PD for teachers so they don't have to pay it out of pocket.
Right.
Am I following that correctly?
Right. They wouldn't have to put it on their credit card and then get reimbursed.
All right, and then would
That
you
would
be doing a
different
line
fee.
item transfer of about
Correct.
15,000 from that to wherever that, whatever line that falls into, so that we could see that actually 15 come out and move over? Would you be doing that, Bill? Okay, I'm getting a nod on that for those listening in.
Would that make a new line item then? 'Cause
No,
don't
we
have a line item, or we have a line item for the innovative instruction within our budget that this would then move into?
So
We have it. Okay.
we can move money from one line item.
You
in-
can do
into the-
internal transfers.
Yeah, no,
They
I-
can,
I'm-
yeah,
let me finish.
internally.
Into the non-lapsing account?
No,
Is
we
that what
aren't.
you're
We're
saying?
just, we're going to approve a purchase in the non-lapsing account for the HVAC software.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yep.
we aren't moving, there's no moving of money between accounts. We're just approving a hard purchase from
Okay.
the non-lapsing so that these, I guess you'd call them a software purchase, would be easier to do from the budget.
And easier for the professionals who need the training to actually have it purchased for them. That way it can go through the PO process rather than a reimbursement process.
Right, and
Correct.
it just would, and like, I think to
Right,
Troy's point
yeah.
too, it encourage them to do it. You might be
Absolutely.
reluctant to do it if you have to pay
And-
for it yourself.
Troy, you've talked to the town and they don't consider this
Yep.
to look shady, and I don't think it's shady. It looks very clear to me, and we're saying it publicly.
Well-
I just want to make sure there's nothing that somebody's going to look back afterwards and say, oh, well, you took this and moved this, and you're just shifting things. I have no problem doing it because I think that we're just changing where the same money's coming from. It's that whole same pie going in a different way, making it easier to do it. But I just want to make sure that we've also nobody over there is going, well, that, you're just sidestepping a step,
I
right?
think, no, I don't think so. I think it's up to you to decide how to spend your non-lapsing, and as long as you vote to spend your non-lapsing on the software upgrade, and they can see in the minutes, you voted to do that, and we say, okay, here's the invoice for the software,
And the-
please pay it. They're just gonna pay it. They're not gonna ask.
And
any
the
questions.
HVAC software was not in our original budget. So we aren't
Right.
pulling out an approved budget item either. So
So I'm totally fine, with doing it because you're right. A teacher shouldn't have to pay for something and then wait for reimbursement. People don't want to
Right,
do
and
that.
then there's suppose interest kicks in too, right?
Right, and it just, like you said, it's uncomfortable and it's not supporting them doing that. My question is really around, the non-lapsing process and how we're using it, because it is kind of new. I
Yeah.
just, I'm trying to get a better sense of how it all works. So then the non-lapsing account, Chet, I think you said the word PO, so that if I'm a teacher and I want to go to some sort of conference, I can't say, here's the conference I want to go to, and then a check is written out of the non-lapsing account
No.
for that conference?
no,
So why is that? What's the thing that makes
the,
that
the
different?
town controls that money, so they have, it's a reimbursable account. The way that works is we pay the expense and then it's a reimbursed, right?
No, they pay the vendor
Oh,
directly.
Oh. Oh.
They won't
right.
pay us. They won't give it to the Board of Ed.
So why can't they pay the vendor directly?
They can't.
So if I'm,
That's the
So so the issue is there's a delay here. So it's very difficult to us to run 50 checks through the non-lapsing. So yes, we could get the registration, then we have to handle it, and we gotta take it to the town, then the town has to cut the check, they bring the check back to me, and I gotta send it in, and sometimes there's a 2-week delay. And
And if there's a registration due next
and they
week,
have to,
Right.
and they made, right, so the registration. So, and their sort of, for whatever reason, their rule is they have to pay directly to the vendor. They can't reimburse us. They won't, like, you could say, well, we could use our credit card and register it. They won't write a check to our credit card account because they say that's paying us directly.
I totally get the idea of
So
not
there's- So
reimbursing.
there's a lot of efficiencies here.
Yeah,
like-
that makes a ton of sense. My question is around, why is it so difficult to streamline that process? And Bill, this may not be a question for you, but rather sort of a process issue that's between departments.
sometimes, so the treasurer has to sign those checks
And they
he-
sign them, I know they sign them once a week. Brett and Nicole sign them, and then Sean Murphy signs them, and I know that Brett has to go in early Monday morning every week and sign all the checks that are out. So I know that this process is not one that is, the check part, there really isn't a delay.
Yes.
So I wonder
It's not
what
very
is the
efficient.
disconnect?
The problem, from what I understand, is there is some delay. However, it's because they will not, we can't pay for a registration and they then give us the money out of.
No,
the
no, I
budget,
get that.
right?
We can't be
Okay.
reimbursed. I don't
Right.
understand the
Right.
delay in just processing a payment to a vendor.
Well, what if, I guess I'm just thinking about, let's say it's Tuesday afternoon, I'm a teacher and I found a conference I'd really like to attend. You get a ton of email, you get a ton of stuff, and it's like deadline is Friday. I need to sign up, register. Now we gotta take that extra step to me, it's muddying it. a
Sure,
little
what's the
bit.
approval process for a teacher's PD? Does it turn
Just
over?
goes over to,
It turns
Troy.
over like in 2 days? I mean,
Well, it
like,
depends on what who everybody's doing. I mean, Rob, if it's at the
Yeah.
line school, Rob has to approve it, and then I have to approve it. and
so it's
then-
unlikely
so-
that on a Tuesday, I'm applying for something that has a deadline on a Friday because I have to get approval from like other people, right?
I mean, the time, the delay stuff, the timing thing, to me, isn't a big issue, because most people plan way ahead
Right.
if they're gonna go to conference, so the timing isn't a huge issue. It's a matter of who pays, and if the teacher pays, they need to get reimbursed, so we don't want.
we
the
don't want
teacher to
that.
pay.
No, I
We wanna
agree.
just be able to,
I want the town to write the check to the vendor, I guess is what I'm saying. I totally agree with you. I don't think that the teachers should be paid.
Oh, no, no,
I don't
so
think
that,
there should be a delay.
so I think the town should write the
Yes.
a check for the registration for that teacher. is
I'm
what you're
I'm
saying?
missing the complicated piece where, because I get the reimbursement part as well, that's not allowed. I'm missing the complicated piece where it's like this insurmountable problem with a huge delay in our teeny tiny town that teacher A can't say, hey, I want to go to this conference and it's been approved by my people, you know, please cut a check so I can go. So I don't care about doing this today because I want teachers to be able to go to PD. I just want to understand and sort of streamline that process as our non-lapsing account gets used more and more. I don't want to restrict how we can use it. I don't see a real problem with why this process can't get better. And I hope that it will. Like, I don't want us just to give up and say like, okay, well, you know, we'll just transfer this stuff out. Like, this should be stuff that we can pay out of the non-lapsing because the process should get better.
Maybe.
And I don't
Not
think it's,
there
I
yet.
don't think it's a school
don't-
problem or a
Right.
town problem, but rather like, how do we do this better together?
I would, from the opposite side of that though, Stephanie, I would also say that in the future, we're hoping this wouldn't be coming out of non-lapsing anyway.
1,000%,
Because
but we'll have
we
something else
shouldn't
that
have
does.
the quick little ones. It should be
Right.
big things,
Right.
big
But
tickets
we'll
that we're
have
doing.
things
And
to
that would
do.
really look.
And we should be able to maximize how we use that account, right? I don't want it to become this complicated thing if it doesn't have to. So I know that it's new. I agree with you. This should be in our budget and we should be dealing with professional development out of our budget, not out of our non-lapsing account. But as different things come up, I'd like to see this process be less complicated. Right,
Yeah,
because
we do-
they would
yeah,
be right,
we do
Bill would
for
write the check,
PO.
right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's,
So,
So
okay,
what-
just
so-
another silly aspect. If it would happen that way, are you expecting that the teacher is still paying, but you're writing the check, or the teacher is giving you the thing, you're writing a check directly to the vendor?
so the process would be, it would come to our office and then I would have to write a memo, put the information together, sign off on it, send it over to the town hall, and the town hall, I sent check, sometimes it takes a while before the,
No,
It's-
not,
it's a
not- not- not
non-lapsing, it's just a-
non-lapsing bill. Just if it's in our budget and a teacher wants to go to a conference, they just they fill out the form. It says, I want to go to a conference on Friday. You say, okay, I'll write out the check, and you write the check to the conference.
correct.
What, a quick question. Why don't we use the 250 account just to do if it's a conference and just overrun it and then get reimbursed for the expense?
The town won't reimburse us. No, Alex, you're right. The easy way would be we write and then I have a pile. Okay, here's 30 registrations
Right.
for $5,000. Write the check to us, but they won't do that.
If they can't give us money back.
Allocated money from the non-lapsing for innovative instruction, and that's where this is coming from. I guess my other
So-
concern
so,
with
uh,
doing small, I know we approved this 28,000, so we don't have to approve these small ones, but as the 28,000 depletes, is the board going to want a list line item of all of those things? What I don't want to do is create extra work where we maybe don't need to. I mean, just the process you explained right now of how you get a check out of non-lapsing sounds like time is money. And if there's a simpler way, we can show a line item, we purchase stage curtains and monitors, why not HVAC software? Knowing that next year innovative instruction is going to go in there, and now we've just basically freed up money for innovative instruction within our budget to give our superintendent some ability to be creative with that and do the things they need to do for that without having to do this jump through several hoops.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It just is I'm questioning why there are so many hoops to jump through. I think the process should be less complicated because Christine, you're right. We want the money to be spent. It's important. Troy should be approving whatever PD is appropriate. And I don't care if we buy HVAC or PD, that's for me not the issue, but rather how do we make our access to our non-lapsing account less burdensome and complicated for everyone? It shouldn't be, you're right, Bill shouldn't be spending 2 hours trying to get a reimbursement check
Maybe,
for something.
if we can move forward with this tonight, looking at solving that moving forward, one thing, when I get to my report, I am meeting with the Board of Finance in November. So maybe that, I'm sure the selectmen will be there, and maybe that's something we can have some open discussion on, as well as when we're sponsoring the next tri-board meeting.
Yeah.
So we need to have some more discussion on what are those processes, and is there an easier way? Because what we're finding, and we can use this as an example
Yeah.
of how we're having to do different purchasing things that really, we'd like it to be as transparent as to what we're actually purchasing from what we've allocated in that budget.
And efficient for everyone.
Right.
Well, in the meantime, I would make a motion to, purchase the HVAC update at $15,429 out of the non-lapsing account.
I'll second that.
All right. Any other discussion? Steph, does that seem to make sense what I just
It
proposed as
totally
well?
makes sense. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd rather fix the process. I don't care about this particular issue. We should have them both.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question, is that a recurring cost or is it just once every 5 years or?
So this is an upgrade, because you know, the whole software system, we need to upgrade. And then after this is, so it's an initial cost, and then going forward, it'll just be an annual maintenance cost of, you know,
you
a
put
couple
that in-
thousand or
It'll
something.
be in the budget for future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like we have a contract with New England Mechanical, we'll have a contract with this company to maintain as we going forward. But there's so much that needs to be done currently. No, not just the software, but it's actually going around and changing, you know, some thermostats need to be replaced, some switches need to be replaced, you know, upgrading certain things, so the sensors and everything, so it all works.
So for the amount, you don't want to put it on the maintenance services at all, or you want it lapsing? Only because if it's a recurring expense that.
Well, that amount won't be recurring.
Next year,
But next year I'll put it on the list. When we go through the budget, it'll be a part of our list of maintenance costs. I've already added it to the list. In fact, I'm already working on those lists anyway. Budget starts pretty soon.
Yeah, I just like everything cataloged in the right.
Yeah,
spot. That's the only thing.
Yeah. yeah, we're working on that. You'll see that, Alex, when we start working on the budget. I know what you mean. I had the same,
No, it's.
so next year, it won't be in the non-lapsing, it'll be in the budget as a
I
line
understand.
item.
I-
And
I
under
just say I'm not-
service,
Just a nit for me that Phil knows.
Bill, did we have to bid out to whomever the person who does this upgrade is? Or is it like a standard, like, do we have? a
well, they were
contractor?
the people that installed the system.
Right, so they
back-
continue to maintain it for us.
Yeah, so they're continue maintaining what happened over the last, couple of years, and the pandemic sort of fell by the wayside.
Right, and we've had some HVAC issues
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, it's 7 generations behind the software. That's why there's a big expense right now. That's not 7 years necessarily. Sometimes
Right.
there's 2 upgrades a year.
Right.
you know.
any other questions?
Actually, I have something to go back to for Troy when he was talking about doing the drill with the fire department and all of that. How often do you do those drills? Is that something that you just started with?
Can we
that?
do that after we finish our motion?
Oh, sure, yeah.
All right, thank you. I
Sorry.
appreciate that. Just, no, that's okay. Any other, there's a motion on the table. Any other questions on the approval of the 15,429? Okay, all those in favor? Aye, opposed, abstained. And then we'll add that to the non-lapsing, switch that around. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry about
Sorry,
that.
that's okay, no
I
problem.
thought we'd already gone through that. We've been on that for a while.
I confuse easily, so.
So I was. With regard to that drill, is that something that you just started with them, something that you do regularly?
This was initiated by the state,
Okay,
saying that districts need to do this.
Yep.
And I have participated in a similar thing in another district.
okay,
So I believe it's like it's not a every year thing. I
Okay.
believe it's like in every few years, they say, all right, districts need to do this drill, and it's statewide in terms of them sending out what the situation is and then any updates on the situation.
They do it regularly. I know one of the ones Peter had to do one time was for tornadoes.
well, and,
So-
and the reason I ask is this sort of a tabletop exercise that you
Yeah.
do with these groups, right? Is that something you might want to do in, preceding larger events here, like say graduation? What would happen if, let's say, go a couple of years ago where where the state police were chasing someone down Route 2, but that's happening while graduation's going on, and now you got to figure out how to shelter in place or do something like that. Do you have the instant command to actually maintain that
Well, I
real
think-
time?
Well, I think that the drill we just did allowed us to respond better if that situation happened.
Okay.
Because now we all know each other a little better.
Yep.
For one. And the other thing is we've talked about different ways to respond to different scenarios, who would be responsible for what, kind of defining the roles and all that.
Right.
So a lot of what we did is applicable to many different situations
Okay.
in terms how we would organize and the roles and the communication. So, I think in terms of, time, it would be great to do a drill before every major event to just talk about the possibilities, but it's not really realistic.
Okay. I was just curious.
Thanks, Brian. For my report, I don't have a lot. The Board of Finance invited me in for last week's meeting, but I was not available. So I am going to the November 1st meeting. I'm not sure if they went through our financials. I think they took a glance at them. I haven't watched the meeting yet. So I will definitely address these non-lapsing things. I also want to go over with them maybe any staffing changes that we've had that might affect the current budget, and also some of the contractual impacts that they can expect moving forward that we've just approved. Nothing too deep on the staffing, but just, for example, that we have a new director of special education, that kind of thing. Then just answering any questions, and then also working towards the next meeting for the tri-board. You can have me down for the representation at the board of directors. I can free up time for that. And I also, let's see. Trying to think of what else it was. We're going to put a finance committee on for November 8th at 5:45. If everybody's okay with that. We didn't do one for October, but we will, and I know Bill had done some work for us on that already, so we'll pick that up. I will reach out to our new board member when we have them in November. And with that, I think this is a good time to also say goodbye to Phil. It's been too long for me to remember how long you've been on the board. 2008. Yeah, no, 15 years, because I'm 10 years this year. So, yeah, you really, your background and just having that history and being able to share all that, you've always put the students first, which is really, really important. And I really appreciate your support over the years, and we will miss you.
I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for all your service to the school and the community, and your quiet presence here, and your valuable input that you've given over the years. When I wasn't in this seat for many years, I was watching you from the other side, and you've made a real difference. And I hope you know that.
Luckily for you, we're hybrid, so you can join us anytime. Okay. All right. Thanks, Phil. Stay in touch.
Wait, Phil, and this is for you from everybody.
Thank you, Phil. We'll miss you so much.
now, that's just it's a different board, that we work so well together, and that even if someone doesn't agree, that we talk and express each other's concern, and that we still work together. The guys doing.
Thank you. We were worried you weren't going to come.
Thanks, Bill.
And then the only other thing that I had to report, there is a CABE Leadership Conference on December 6th. I'm going to look to register for that. I will just pay for that out of pocket, though. We don't need to pay it through the town. So I feel like I've already attended my conference for the year, but it's usually pretty good. And that does also have some, it has a section for new members as well. So I will offer that to our newest member when they join. And if they want to attend, I'll have the Board of Ed pay for that. So that brings us up, we have policies to discuss under old business, the first one being the dress code. And I will let you. take that
Are
up.
you sure we want to start there and not with the other ones? I feel like the other ones may be easier. Do we do the other one? Are we
It's
allowed
up to
to go
you.
out-
Yeah, we can go out of order. That's fine.
Did everybody get an opportunity to look at the 1100, the 1110 and the 1110.1?
Yeah, can I just get clarification real quick before we jump in?
Absolutely.
So in looking at this, they are all communication with the public. 1110 is general, or 1100 is the general. 1110 is the communication with the public, distribution of printed material. And 1110.1 is communication with the public, parent involvement. And then there's only one that's required, correct? By state statute.
I don't know that any are actually required.
I thought the 1110.1 was state statute requires to adopt and implement encouraging parent-teacher communication.
Yeah, that was my
Okay,
thought.
yes. All right. So the 1110.1 is required. That's the one that to me is less of an issue, honestly, because I feel like it's pretty straightforward. The only thing I was going to say on the 1110.1 personally was I don't believe, and I would need to clarify on this, but I don't believe we need to do the piece on virtual learning. And it's pretty extensive, but it states that it's options of this, and I don't know if this was a state law that was put in during that or not. If you look at the 1110.1 at the bottom of the first page there, it says that outside of the 2 required parent-teacher conferences, it starts adding new parent-teacher conferences every 3 months.
Any chance we just keep the 1110.1 and not adopt the other 2? I think that was the kind of my comment last time, but
Sorry, could we just get some clarification? Are you talking about the
Sorry, I am not talking about the CABE policy services one is different than the one that I consistently was referencing myself, because the one that I get is out of the core manual. The CABE policy services one, I don't get those.
So are we looking at the one in the packet or the one that was given previously?
The one that I handed out, that's the 1110 and the 11.
the one that you gave last time that doesn't have Cape on it?
Version 3 references not made, but so the 1110 is in our current packet
Oh,
that says from CABE Core Policy Manual.
I'm with you. I found it.
So we have 3 versions.
But the 1110.1, I was going off of the previous copy. I think Irma and I need to,
But these
Make
read
sure
the same. Do you know what I mean? This is the one you handed out last time, correct?
so the 1110.1 gave
you-
us
If you read there,
3 options.
right, these read the same. This has 3 options in it as well.
The 1110.1 here, or is this our? So if you look at the Cape Policy Services one, same thing at the bottom, the 2 required parent-teacher conferences per year, beginning July 1st. Either of them have the same piece. And the idea that it would add additional parent-teacher conferences, which I was a bit confused on because I don't know that we can even do that, seeing as parent-teacher conferences are set out in our contract. So the idea that we have a policy that directly contradicts our collective bargaining seemed not okay. So if we adopt the 1110.1, I don't believe we can adopt the piece where it adds the extra based on virtual instruction.
We would have to strike that from it.
So that was the big piece that when I was looking through them and trying to figure out exactly what would need to be done, I think we would need to lose that. So unless that's a state law, that would contradict our collective bargaining.
Correct.
I guess I'm kind of with Alex on this. I don't really see a problem with the one we have in place. Personally, when I'm looking at it, it seems fine to me. Is there a reason that we would be changing it at this point? Other than because we have one in place, it's required, we already have one. Do we need to update it?
With the 1110.1, we have one in place that reads exactly the same as the one here.
Right, or do we need all 3? Or do we need all 3? Yeah. Right, right. Understood.
My recommendation would be we adopt the new Cape policy so that we update our language, but that we would strike the aspect of having the 2 parent-teacher conferences added in. As the C version you want to do?
So this was easier than dress code. Got it.
Just really,
It's the numerical aspect of it, I feel like, more than anything.
There's 3
I have no problem with
policies.
any of these because to me, I have to be honest, none of this to me is controversial in any way. It's simply which one we want to put into our handbook and if we want to strike the 1100 or the 1110. We don't have the 1110, but if we want to introduce the 1110 instead of the 1100, which is how the core policy manual does it for CABE, or if we just want to put in 1110.1 with that community relations short version, I am fine with that. I have no problem with this.
Okay, how about I make a motion to do that?
Can you clarify? Can you say that again?
so 1110.1.
Yep.
We have one currently.
Yep.
We have 2 options for updates that you should have.
And it's statutory that we have. to
They're
have.
statutory that we have one. We already have one. So we're following state statute, but there is some updated language. There's the first one that looks like this, which is which mirrors what was handed out to us.
Yep.
And we could do that one and per Chet's recommendation, which makes sense to cut out some things around the virtual. Then there's a second option that is short and sweet, 5 bullets, parent involvement. It hits the state statute. We could regulate that. It basically, very encompassing. In the end is the superintendent shall periodically report to the board on the implementation of the policy. That's the one we're kind of recommending is the shorter version.
We're sharing one copy.
Okay.
Hold on, we'll get there.
Okay.
I think if you go with the shorter policy, it's a bit more general. I think it's a bit easier to manage in many regards. I think, sometimes the policy needs to be long because of what it's addressing. Sometimes it can be short. And I think in this case, in this instance, short would be fine.
Okay. So what we could do then is just let's call this version 2, or motion.
Irma, do you understand which one we're talking about?
I'll give it to you at the end. I can hand it to you. All right. So we need a motion to approve the policy 1110.1 second version.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do we need a second? All right. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I liked on the backside of that one, for the parent involvement, they talk about they say PTA, but our.
That's a regulation.
Oh, okay, never mind. You gave me too much to read.
Any? Right. All those in favor? Aye.
So I am fine with Alex's recommendation of eliminating, we do not have 1110 right now. 1110 was what I was originally stating I thought was a better language for 1100. We currently have 1100 and 1110.1 in our policy manual. And 1100 was going to be a
That's general.
but if you look at them, they have the exact same things. So but neither of them is required.
So I'd like to make a motion to delete those other two.
One, it's only one we have, 1100.
1100.
1110 we don't have. It was just going to be what if we were going to replace, I think replacing with the 1110 was better, but
I'll second.
All right. So we have a motion to delete policy 1100. All right. Any discussion on that?
Yes,
Yes.
why wouldn't we want to replace it with 1110? Why wouldn't we want to do that? Why do we want to
Well,
delete it without replacing?
My thought is, does it bring much to the table? I guess that you can't administer on your own as a admin board, right?
It does give the time frame though
Yeah.
of when things need to be posted, and I'm wondering if that's important. It's not, it's optional. It isn't required. Oh. Right.
But what's interesting and what I don't understand is that our current policy states that all of our minutes have to be posted in unapproved form after 72 hours. And this one says 7 days in the core manual, but the CABE one says 72 hours. So we have 3 different versions of of this statement in play. One of them is the CABE services one, where it states that it has to be within 72 hours. One of them is the CABE core manual, which says 7 days. And one is our current policy, which is a separate number, which also says 72 hours.
In my opinion, we should go with the 7 days. I think 72
If we're
hours
going-
is,
But right now we have a motion on the table to eliminate it altogether within our policy manual. So the idea would be then we would just be governed by statute, which statute can't dictate that it would be 72 hours if the option that CABE is giving as this is 7 days. So I would assume we have those 7 days, and it would just be the way that we implement our process.
so wouldn't it be more clear if we kept 1100?
My original piece coming in was to say that we would not keep 1100,
I
but
mean,
replace it with
1110, excuse
1110.
me. Yes, that's what I meant.
And then adopt new language with that. I don't see any specific reason if the board wants to eliminate 1100 and not replace with 1110. It's not a requirement. And therefore, that's why, that's the motion on the table at the moment. And it would just be whether or not we had discussion that stated that we thought that 1110 or another version of 1100, which is also an option we can take, were things that we wanted to include.
Yeah, there was a comment that we do have, we're kind of over policied as a board anyway, so this is an opportunity maybe to not have to go back at stuff like this in the future. That was the only reason.
Well, and if it's confusing for us, And it's going to be confusing for the community to say, well, is it what the board policy has, or is it state statute, or how should it be? If there's a statute out there on how we have to do it anyway, and we are following that, why do we need a separate
A quick
policy?
Google search says the 7 days.
Right, so I think there is a motion on the table right now to eliminate 1100. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unless you had more that you want to say about it.
Nope, I just didn't.
All right. All right. Anybody that doesn't want to eliminate it? Okay, so the motion carries. And then if you want to put in a motion to add the other one, if that's the one you'd like, you could certainly do that. If Chet feels strongly about adding it, I don't want him to feel like he can't. I mean, we could vote it against
No,
it, but
my feeling was the idea that the 1100 made no sense compared to the 1110. If what we're looking to do is not have it, that's fine. Our CABE audit that we had stated it as good practice. So it would just be whether or not we were following that audit, because the audit chose not to delete it. But I don't. But I don't have an issue with not replacing it with the 1110. It's not a required policy. If nobody sees anything within the 1110 policy that they think needs to be in our policy manual, then there's really no reason to put it there.
I guess the only thing that it came up in the last meeting, we talked about how moving forward, if we're all not on the board, like, is it very clear as to what we're going to do? So even how, just making sure that we widely disseminate the information. I kind of agree that I think part of it could be removed, but I feel like if CABE is saying it's good practice, maybe, is it worth keeping just for future? So.
I guess, has it ever been an issue?
I guess I would say there's a couple of things on here. It states specifically that any proper written communication from a citizen organization will be placed on the agenda. That piece of things comes into play with the idea that if we receive a request from the public, that we have to, like, that piece of it would be something that if other people, again, I'm just trying to think of situations where if this were not the board, where could somebody take a bad turn? So if the policy directly states you need to, if I as a member of the public write a letter to the Board of Education, I sign my name and I say, I would like this to be discussed according to the written communication policy with the communication with the public, that would require us to put it on our agenda. I think we likely would. We tend to discuss the things that are coming up that people are bringing to our attention, but it would put it into our actual practice.
I agree with that.
Where does it say that?
Oh, the 11. Sorry. But no, the 1110. We eliminated the 1100.
Oh, right.
This is the 1110. Outside of that, I think there's a decent amount of fluff in this. I mean, I have to be honest. It's like we're going to have a community relations committee, and there's going to be these pieces, and it's not even a committee. I don't believe the way that they word it. But
so I guess to move this forward, if you'd like to make a motion to add it, and then we can vote on it and kind of decide from there.
I'm not super.
If anybody wants to make a motion to add it, if nobody wants to make a motion, then it's just gonna lay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to add 1110 back in.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion now? If there's a motion on the table to add it back in?
Are we adding it back in? I thought we were just adding.
No, we're
it
just
down.
adding it.
We're
Right,
not
'cause
adding
we
it back.
We
Sorry,
got rid of
wrong-
1100.
Wrong words, sorry.
Sorry, I
Okay.
said it wrong.
I just want to make sure I'm saying the right.
I guess I would ask, outside of the idea of adding to the agenda and specifically stating the number for the public, if they were gonna look quickly in terms of when minutes should be, is it something that adds something special that we need? I mean, as a board, do we think so? Are those, is that agenda piece important enough with the written communication, or do we think we're good without it? That would be my statement.
I think it, that piece in and of itself, I think kind of links directly back to transparency of the board and what we're willing to do to engage the public and how we plan on engaging the public. And, you know, if it's in our policy that it's there, people can know that we are going to follow that because we're beholden by that, correct? So I think, you know, I think it, at the very least, it is an active show of good faith to the members of this community that if they submit a topic for us to discuss in a meeting, that this is the avenue to do it. And we will, because our policies state that we will do it this way, we'll handle it that way. So I think that piece alone, I think is very beneficial for us as a board to have, to demonstrate to the members of our community that we are willing to hear them out and that their voice is encouraged to be part of these meetings.
I'll just say that we've had, as Bill alluded to, very different boards over the years.
Yeah.
And anytime someone brought something up, it always came to the board and we discussed it. There was no
Right.
time that, that's why,
I don't doubt that.
yeah, that's why I kind of say, why do we need another one? So that's my own opinion, so.
All right.
There may be people in the public that don't know us, that don't know, does not know the board and wouldn't realize that a topic that they wish to be discussed would be on the agenda or could be on the agenda.
Well, and so I think you guys are misreading that a little bit, though. They're not, the public isn't allowed to put topics on the agenda. We'll place on it a properly signed communication. So it's a communication they're sending me. We can't have the public saying, I'd like on the next meeting this on the agenda. And we're going to say, well,
Fair.
because you asked, we're going to put that on the agenda. This is saying, I signed a piece of
communication,
communication to
sorry.
you.
I mentioned
That
that, and yeah.
communication goes on the agenda, not, the public doesn't,
But it's read.
Right. It
But
comes
it's
in
right.
Right.
correspondence.
right, but it's not it's not a topic. The public
No, I-
can't come to us with a topic to
Right.
put on. I just want to be clear on
No,
that.
understood. Yeah, you're right. I was misreading it across the table.
Because I mean, imagine how that could go, right? So, all right. So I think we've discussed this. We have a motion on the table. All those in favor of adding 1110 to the policy manual? And opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, that was the easy one. We added 1110. Mm-hmm.
This is a simple discussion. Let's go. Just for policy. Let's have fun.
Where do we begin? Okay,
Well-
so we heard from administration regarding their views on this. I know that we have a variety of views that land in different places.
Right.
I guess our general aspect, maybe to start with, would be to take a look at whether or not the board would like to go on a more strict regulation-based policy as presented in the version that we got that Brian had created, or if we were comfortable with if we wanted to revisit the one that was built off of the K policy brought to us by administration.
Sorry, I just want to say a comment because I didn't get to say it earlier. I just want to address something about some inaccuracies there was a comment that said there were some inaccuracies. I want to clarify that there were some things in the dress code policy before this administration has taken over. So I want to commend them for actually making the changes, but there were some very antiquated policies that were in there. And so luckily they're gone. And I think we're not looking at that anymore. Clearly, those very outdated policies, we don't even need to address. So just to clarify that statement.
So Chet, to sort of talk about like your option, do we want to look at this? After hearing the administrators and after reading this, I don't like this regulation. And so I think because we don't have control over.
The proposed policies that they.
I
give
don't like the
us.
regulation that accompanies their policy. So the policy with a few words that I don't love taken out, the policy would be fine, but my focus has always been, what does the regulation that go along with that policy look like? And we don't have control over the regulation for how we do things here.
But I think they were open to hearing what things we don't like and reworking and taking those things out of the regulation.
But can I ask a question though? So let's take regulation out of this because we know that the regulation is in the hands of the administrator, right? The policy lies with the board. And if anyone were to ever challenge policy, that falls on our shoulders and our policy manual. If the regulation that they put in place does not align with that, it starts with our policy. And why does our policy not align with the regulation? How have we allowed that to happen? These are board policies, not board regulations. And I have no problem with the administrators coming up with the regulations as long as they are in line with a board stated policy. We just have to make sure that whatever we come up with as a policy, as a collective, and with input from the administrators, because yes, they are going to have to implement these policies as well. But we have to be comfortable with the fact that this policy is the policy that we have agreed upon, that we feel is in the best interest of all of our, students and faculty and families, moving forward. It's not something that we, one that makes sure that we are focusing on inclusion, not focusing on stereotype, body shaming, things of that nature. I think we need to make sure that the policy does address those issues. And I think we need to do so in a way in our policy that does not allow for vagueness in some ways. We have to move away from, as we see here, even within the dress code regulation, that term appropriate. Because from generation to generation, the term appropriate has meant different things. If we go back to the 1950s, it was inappropriate for women to wear pants in the classroom. In the 1960s, it was inappropriate for their knees to be visible in the classroom. All right, I think we now need to start moving forward with, we have to move away from those antiquated terms and really focus on what is concrete and what is enforceable. Because using a word like appropriate, that's an unenforceable term. And it actually puts a greater onus on us and the administration to defend what is meant by appropriate. So I think we really need to focus on removing those things that are unenforceable out of here and focus on what we can put into the policy that will help them achieve their ends where they're not constantly having to put people in.
I think you did a better job saying what I was trying to say. I 1,000% agree with you. And I think in a lot of ways, we are intentionally vague in our policy to allow the administrators to create regulations that fit what's going on. And I think that this is a bit of a one-off for us, where I think the consensus of the board seems to be over these conversations that we want to remove, like Brian said, the vague pieces, and we want to make sure that the regulation that implements this policy really has the spirit of the policy within it. So yes, Brian, no vagueness.
And I mean, even at looking at, I would say option one, built off the Cape, I think it has potential to be a good policy. I think it needs to be reworked a bit. I think it has opportunity to kind of embrace, I think, the spirit of what we're looking for in the policy. I think it just needs a bit of tweaking. Again, I'd have no problem. What's that? Well, here's the thing. You can, within number one, you can actually wordsmith out appropriate and things like that. Because I think we have to focus more on, because I would never say that the board expects students will dress appropriate for the school day. I don't know what appropriate for the school day means. Or a school sponsored event, because if we're talking about appropriate for a school sponsored event, you know, where are we going? And how, who's the determinant of that, right? That's something that can be revised to, I think, hit the spirit of what we're looking
Yeah,
for.
you could take out that sentence entirely.
Yeah, that sentence has no added value, in my opinion. You know, I think,
Appropriate and reasonableness are used on a variety of occasions throughout the first option.
but I'm thinking with regard to this, when I look at this as a whole, like, I see this kind of addresses some of the spirit. I think, again, it just needs that wordsmith. It needs that sharp pen of revision to take in some of what we think is really good in other versions and bring that in. Because I get it. You know, I think a couple of choice words struck a chord with some people. While they might have been, you know, appropriate and, you know, anatomically correct, they might not have resonated with individuals.
Yeah, so the things that you had said you wanted, I
Mhm.
think you had said like gender neutral, and that's in the last line of this option one.
Right.
You had said about body size, body type. That's
Yes.
in the last sentence of the
Of
second to last
third
paragraph,
Yeah.
right?
Fourth paragraph.
So I think this has a lot of what I think the board is overall looking for with the updated language. You're right, though. It does say appropriateness
Right,
a
so-
couple times.
The problem also, Troy, is that there's nothing in that policy that says that the regulation can't talk about things like clothing must provide appropriate coverage. Top stresses should provide appropriate coverage and should run across the body from armpit to armpit.
Where are we looking?
So
Right.
I'm looking at the regulation
Right.
and I'm saying that
So-
nothing, no revision of that current policy, even removing those words, makes it clear that this could not be the regulation. And that's what I want.
You're right.
I want to make sure that this regulation can't
So-
be in place
Yeah.
because of the policy.
Right, yeah, you had talked about, wanting no
So I don't
reference
li-
to body.
Right, I don't want words like appropriate coverage anywhere. I don't want to talk about torsos not being exposed. I don't want any of that in the regulation. And so to me, it's really important that our policy make that impossible.
So maybe the policy says that.
I liked your policy, Brian. But I'm more comfortable with that sort of like direct
Directness. Right.
language. That's okay with me.
but
That's
you-
okay with me.
Well,
No,
actually,
it'll
no, it doesn't. It
fall
falls
on,
the parents.
it'll fall on the parent, which is where I believe
Because-
it should be.
Because the decision on how a student should dress lies with the family. The school can say a student may not wear a swimsuit to school. That is an appropriate part of a regulation, right? But if a kid's wearing a tube top, or I found out that this is a term, a bandeau top. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
So if they do wear it, will we put them home?
No, not a tube top or bandeau, because
So are you saying we shouldn't ask them to cover up?
Yes. I don't believe we should be asking anyone to cover up. And currently, they're not being sent home. And I love the changes that they've made in terms of it only being the administrators that are addressing it, because I think that takes some of those pieces away about who finds what appropriate or is concerned about certain things. I love that they're doing it in a way that doesn't take away from instructional time or single out a kid or
Yes.
anything like that. I think that our administrators are incredibly sensitive to kids.
yes.
And this isn't about them, but rather our policy isn't setting them up for success. So I don't want a child pulled out of school by anyone and to be told, I need you to zip up your hoodie because your belly's out.
So if someone came in with a bikini, that's okay?
No, we
Yes.
said swimwear is off
that
limit.
is, that is.
And
somewhere
I
in-
believe that's even in what I wrote,
Yeah,
Or
what's the
some-
difference between swimwear and a, what did you call it?
a bando.
A bandeau? What, I don't understand. No, I know, but we're saying not to cover up?
No, I don't want anyone to be told to cover up.
So shouldn't they be expected to come to school covered up?
No, I don't think they should. I think that a parent should be providing that guidance. And if someone at school, a social worker, an administrator, has a concern about how a kid is presenting at school, I think it's okay to reach out to the parent. I just don't want our district regulating what appropriate looks like. And unless we're gonna really regulate it like we say we do about dressing for, some of these words about like, dressing for safe semesters, then we're gonna have to talk about things like pajamas. We might have to talk about things like blue hair, because there are places in the real world where you can't have those things. So I want to move away from this idea that our dress code.
Yep. Can I just get
Sure.
clarification when I'm looking at this one from Brian?
Mhm.
It's very specific. Shirt with fabric in front, back, on the sides, under the arms. It's got all the things that you don't want.
No, I'm
What?
totally comfortable with that.
Well,
policy.
I thought you said you want them to be able to wear a bathing suit.
Hold on.
No, I don't want them to be able to wear a bathing suit. No, I want to stop focusing on things like a girl's belly being out. Fabric is okay. That policy to me is shockingly specific and is completely appropriate.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think where the problem lies is what we start defining success. And I think that we need to not have that as part of our definition and say, okay, here's what you have to have covered. And I know the language is jarring, but that is anatomically correct. Like we have to use appropriate adult language to talk to children about how to cover things up, right? And then what you absolutely cannot wear. You cannot wear a bathing suit. You cannot have anything violent, all of that. It's really putting the emphasis on you can wear this, you can't wear that, to clarify. And I think it does get confusing even for parents.
I gotta just say this. If you had a staff dress code or a Board of Ed dress code that was written and it said you need to cover your genitals, your buttocks, and your nipples, do you think that's demeaning in any way? Do you think the teachers might look at that and be like, you gotta be kidding me. You're telling me I have to cover my buttocks and my nipples. And this is like, it's like talking down to them. Like, isn't that obvious? Don't
No.
you think kids know they need to cover their genitals in school?
I don't think it's demeaning at all. I think it's language, Troy, in working in the field of victimization and specifically child sexual assault for my entire career. I can tell you that we do people in general, society and children a disservice by making those words jarring and shocking. We need to, like, it's okay to say the word nipple. We can say penis. We can say vagina. It's okay. It's not demeaning. It's not talking down to anyone. It's removing the weirdness from those words, removing the shock and allowing people just to speak so that when we have to talk about problems with those areas, they're not shameful, they're not confusing, they're not shrouded in all these other issues. So I appreciate that you come from a different lens and say some of this stuff may feel demeaning. From my lens, I think we should all be comfortable saying those words. And I think it just sets out, look, here's the thing. I can't have you in a bathing suit. Your nipples need to be covered. Moving on. I don't think we're going to see anything wild in school as a result of this, except that our language will reflect what I think the values of our district are. And I think this dress code does us a total disservice. Our current dress code, not the one being.
Well, you heard from kids today and they both talked about, they didn't think like having those words were appropriate for Board of Ed policy.
Well, I want to know why kids are feeling comfortable using those words.
Well,
What
maybe
feature-
it's not comfortable, maybe they are comfortable using words, but they just don't feel it's appropriate for Board of Ed policy.
Well, I think just I had a quick conversation with Maddie before we came because I knew she peeked at it and she said, because it's obvious we're going to cover those things. She said, she just said it's a little bit like you're talking to us like we're idiots. Like we're obviously not going to have our nipples hanging out. She's not scared of saying the word. She says all kinds of words. They're not scared of them. It's just that at some point you're like, I think for the kids, and I think also taking the teachers out of the piece of it is part of the help, really, because some teachers will be really feel they have to dress code somebody all the time, and other teachers are a little more lax, where now the teachers don't have that burden on them, where I think over the years, where having a daughter, it would be like, well, if I pull my pants way up here and bend over like this, then my midriff won't show this quarter of an inch. Well, that's sort of silly in today's age. The shirts are short, right? So how do we find a happy medium between that and having to say this detailed language? I don't think anybody's scared of the words. They're just words.
But-
It's just they feel like it's obvious.
I understand that it's obvious, but I think we have to state the obvious sometimes because there is going to be somebody that challenges that. And I would argue that I've seen shorts that don't cover the buttocks. And so, I think you have to put it in there for that one-off case. There's no question that that's not allowed. So while, I guess we could work on the language if you want, but it's just kind of like how we have on a cup that says, we're drinking a hot beverage and it says, warning, this is hot. Like we all know this, but you have to write it. It's a policy. It's not meant to be demeaning. It's meant to just be very clear.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw in where I sit here. I think that, I appreciate all the work that you did on this policy, Brian, and I understand, what you guys are saying, and Jamie and Steph. I think it's far too specific. I'm not afraid of using words like nipples and genitalia and all that other stuff, but I feel in this context, it's not necessary. It is not necessary. You come to school with a shirt and some pants, or if you're wearing shorts, I don't know, maybe 4 inches long or something, I don't know, maybe be specific like that. But I heard the admins come in and, a couple of their notes here. When policy is too specific, it requires more policing and becomes more discriminatory against genders. And keeping the specifics under the regulations allow the admin team, and this is very important, I think, to modify and update as necessary with the changing world. The admins that we currently have, I think they're very attuned to all the students in the school and how they're dressing, and I'm not interested in running the school. I think a less specific policy would be in order, and I'm okay with either one of the policies that we presented minus the appropriateness, the word appropriate, because that is such a subjective term. There are some wording that could be changed in there. I completely agree. I want it to be completely gender neutral, and further where it says, does it say, I don't know, in something I read here, maybe it's not even right in front of me, but dressing for success or taking pride in yourself and in your school, I don't like to see that in policy or in regulation.
It's not enforceable in any way, shape, or form.
And it also isn't very inclusive. There are families, there are students who, they feel comfortable in this, which it might not be suitable, in my opinion, for a job interview, but who am I to say what they should wear to a job interview? It's what they feel comfortable in school with, who they are expressing themselves. So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I feel that we should be rather vague and not so specific and detailed, because I don't want to do anything that makes the administrators terribly uncomfortable. I don't want to do anything that makes this board terribly uncomfortable. I want to come and find some kind of common ground here that makes sense for everyone.
I
That's
just want
sort
to,
of
can I challenge the concern?
Yeah.
That when a policy is too specific, it requires more policing. So while I would generally agree with that, and I think that's why we make our policies vague, I would challenge that the regulations that provide very specific, so the things that I've started here, very specific sort of ideas about what can and can't be worn actually are the things that complicate and require more policing. And then I would ask that anyone that thought that that wasn't the case and that we don't have to do policing, go on to any of our schools' current social media accounts and look at, according to this, to our current policy and regulation, at the violations that you yourself can see that our school administrators are posting online. So if we can see that, like, boom, 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 violation, 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 according to these regulations, then something's wrong. What are
So-
we doing?
So I think what I'm hearing, to bring it back a little bit, is that we still need to look at the policy, certainly.
Absolutely.
The issue is the regulation.
Yeah.
So I heard very clearly tonight, and I agree with you 100%, Lisa, and I appreciate you speaking up, that the admins are willing to listen and work with us on the reg. So while we keep talking about the policy, our discussion keeps going back to the regulation. So I'm wondering if it may be better suited before we adopt any policy that we sit down and have some kind of a working regulation discussion with the admins on what we don't like about the regulation and what we'd like to see different. I know that they don't have to be part of the conversation. This is a small district. Our relationship with them is incredibly important. It isn't like a school of 3,000. It's very small. They want us to trust them and they want to work with us. I heard that repeatedly. So could we come to a happy medium in weighing in on the regulation with them at this point, telling them the parts that we aren't really comfortable with? I am sure they'd be willing to rework some of that and then decide which policy will help work around that as well.
Do you want the regulation to drive the policy or the policy to drive the regulation becomes the question here? Because we can rework the policy and then sit and work with them on the reg based on what we have as a policy. And I think is
My concern is that if, just like you said, things change rapidly, we're going to be revisiting this policy every year.
hold on. I'm not saying this version is the version we have to go with. If you notice, my intro here actually focused on option one.
Right.
Right? I think there's things out of here that can be brought into option one, and there are things that can be potentially omitted from here.
Okay.
But I'm thinking we don't want our regulations to drive our policy because then, yeah, we are going to be updating that policy every year because we have to update it to match the regulation.
Right.
Whereas if we focus policy first and then build the regs out of that, then we actually have a better foundation and better standing moving forward.
Then I think we need to bring this conversation back to policy and not be discussing the current regulations because those will change once our policy changes.
Correct.
Okay.
That
I'm
makes
just trying
I
to
think
correct?
the
Okay,
only reason why I
yes.
bring up regulation, Christine, is because I don't want to spend all this time creating a policy that then allows for regulations not to be created that weren't in the spirit of our policy. So we don't create the regulation, and that's why I'm talking about them, because with this suggested policy comes along a regulation that I'm not comfortable with. So I want a policy that makes sure that the regulation that we're not comfortable with can't happen.
All right.
And so that's why.
All right. I just, my concern honestly is that we might be at a little bit of an impasse on which direction to go. I'm willing to keep talking about it. But
I'm okay
Just
tabling
to throw another wrench in, I also sent Brian the CABE core policy by itself, which I think you were actually more comfortable with
than
than
any of this.
this.
The K
So,
core, yeah. There was like one or two minor tweaks that would have even made to that, but that one I think actually looks better than a lot of these iterations because it has a lot of what we're looking for. Oh, this is
So the CABE core all it was when Brian was doing his work, he wanted, because he didn't have access to the policy stuff and asked for it. So that was the extent of that. I don't have a copy of it with me. Christine has a copy right here.
I believe this is it.
You can get it online, but I don't. But we also have to be careful about discussing a policy that wasn't in our board packet when we're in an open meeting. So I think really it would be one more time.
Let's table this
pushing-
one more time.
Pushing this off, but it would,
Emergency happened.
Phil doesn't want to be on this discussion anymore anyway.
I was gonna say, Phil just gets out of it. Wait, we can't let Phil get out of it. Make him vote.
Still vote now. Forever be on that.
All right, I agree. I don't think it hurts to continue the discussion because I do think it's important, but I do think we aren't
We-
all on the same
Gonna change
page.
what's currently going on. It's
And
not.
Well, and
Right.
I don't know that a vote right now is going to end with any.
agreement.
type of
And
consensus.
I think our goal generally is to finish off with all of us saying, okay, I'm all right with that, as opposed to just saying yes, no. So
Right.
I would love to, am I allowed, just if I send out, can I send out the Cape Core policy
Yes.
to the board members and that's fine?
Just send it to all of us, please. Even though I have a copy, can you
Right.
send it to me too? just
Yeah,
in
y'all
case
know, I
it
would
goes
just send it to Board of Ed. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure it was okay for me to distribute outside of.
Yes,
this
that would be
process.
fine.
And I might
Okay.
even, once you do that again, look at it in light of what the administrators did plus that and maybe try to find a blend between three versions. That might be palatable to the multitudes.
All right, that.
Well, and I do think we've reached some consensus. I think that we could all agree to the idea that if we come up with a policy that eliminates the possibility of certain regulations and then are able to see regulations, process them and come back, I feel like that would at least eliminate some of the concern, and that policy being less specific wouldn't matter as long as it definitely negates certain things from happening within
Correct.
regulations. For sure.
Yeah.
And
And
then
I-
ultimately less policing for
Right.
any administrator if there's less dress code regulation to put.
May I ask if it would be okay to, because November, we have one meeting. There will be a lot. I think this deserves more discussion.
This is a great thing to put under the Christmas tree for our December meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna put it on the first meeting for December, if everybody's okay with that. All right,
It's our gift.
all right, thank you. And I'll celebrate. But
Perfect.
that's okay. We have quite a bit on for November. We'll try to trim it back a little bit for December to include this. Unless you want to just do this one at the next meeting. Stay on task with this.
I would honestly, like, I would say that can we say possibly, if like, if we can look at it and I send out the state policy and I get a whole bunch of that looks great, just take out one word and then we go, okay, I think we made the other spot, is that
I think that makes sense instead of adding other policy for next November.
there? But otherwise, we're
Okay.
adding policies, just have finished other policies. What's that?
Well, I think we're beyond first read. But
Well, no, I mean.
I
if-
just don't want to add any more first reads
I
until
mean,
we
if he-
finish this
What
one
I'm
up.
saying is, if he sends it to everyone and we give him input, I like this word, I like this word, I don't like this word, I want this in here. And then it's condenses to some.
The
neat
input has to
version.
be in the meeting. We can't go back and forth in the emails about what we like and don't like. He can send it to us. We cannot reply. And
Can't reply to him at all.
No.
Okay, I just thought we couldn't reply. at
you
all.
could reply to
we
him, but I would encourage that we don't do that, that we have the discussion in public.
Okay.
Just because there will,
Well,
out of 8 people, somebody will accidentally reply all. And then I just,
so we bring the conversation.
it'll be Phil. It'll be Phil and he's still on the board.
So I guess what I'm saying is we bring the conversation, of course, back to that meeting,
Mhm.
but in the meantime, maybe Chet and I could meet
Sure.
and with a revised version is what I'm saying, to kind of.
You could, and I would just ask that maybe you
process,
bring
you know what I
Brian in
mean?
on that as well, because he's got some good. But yes, you guys could meet and do that for sure. I just don't
Right.
want it to
Yeah, I'm
be
not
an
saying,
email
you know,
conversation. I
I'm
guess
just saying,
is all I-
no, I'm just saying something could be, could be streamlined and, okay, so this is the new suggested version. on top of whatever we have.
Well, I
No,
think that
you
would be
can
the
do
goal.
that.
The goal would be to come with the new suggested version. And if we show up and everybody goes, this is awesome, then we go, okay, let's vote. And if we show up and it starts a discussion, we say, okay, this is a first read. We're going to move this discussion to December.
All right, perfect. Okay, perfect. Good plan. Good plan. All right. Anything, we don't have anything on the playground, nothing on before and after care to update us on?
Sorry. So maybe, I've had some conversations with, other people in the community talking about this. I need to get the word out that Cub Club is not happening this year because we are still getting, inquiries about whether or not when it's running and things like that. So I want to be clear on that. But I think we are going in a different direction than working with the rec, and perhaps even town funded. But I did have a question regarding the $1,200 that we approved as a board and whether or not that could be potentially used as some funding for our director that we want to have to help us make policies and get handbooks written and things so we can kind of get this going, because we'd really like to get the word out starting in April. And so I didn't know if that's a possibility, what we could do.
Can we wait on that? Just, do you need that money this week or before the next meeting?
No.
Because we approved it to go to the rec, so we'd have to put a new motion in to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, or do you need the money right?
No, I don't.
Okay, but why don't we put that on for December 8th or November 8th?
We could wait till January. It's okay.
No, we don't, I
Okay.
didn't want to wait till January. I don't want to lose sight of it. It's 9:00.
Yeah.
So if we could put that on the next meeting, and what we will do is make a motion to reappropriate that money to where you need it to
Okay.
go.
And that's if people want to, or if we get rid of it entirely.
Well, right, but I
Yeah.
think it,
Okay.
we just, because of the way it was motioned to go to the rec department, I think
Okay.
we would need to do it differently. If that's okay.
Yes. I'm sorry. Can I just ask a really quick question about the playground? I'm sorry. Are you going with Game Time? Or did you hire another contract? Okay. Who would they work with? And they're aware of moving some of the equipment? Are they going to be able to do that was placed inappropriately? Or is that, okay, perfect. Great, thank you.
Do you have any, I don't want to rush you. Do you have anything else? Are you sure? Okay. Any new business? Okay. We need to accept the September monthly report.
Make a motion to accept the September monthly report.
All those discussion?
Bill appropriately answered the question, so I'm good. Be nice to have other questions. Board members come in.
Um,
No, I don't think so.
Can I-
Thank you.
Can I ask,
You're the chair of the finance committee.
I did want to ask a follow-up. So you asked about, it was the first question you asked about something for funding for a Board of Education software. Did I read that wrong? Yeah, what is that? For taking minutes. Okay, okay, thank you.
When I looked at the detail on those other handouts, that it kind of, the dollars match the CABE type of stuff, so I wasn't sure myself.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain. And I don't think we have any other discussion for the non-lapsing report tonight. And we have a couple of policy first reads.
Basically, what these do is we have a new start date for incoming kindergarten students. And our current policies read that kindergarten students are accepted as long as they turn 5 by January 1st. And the new rule is by September 1st. So we need to adjust those policies into the new language to be able to adjust for that. But I think we also need to discuss at least a little bit as a board, how we're going to handle the appeals process for next year so that those people who have kids who they thought were going into kindergarten and now suddenly are not have some direction in terms of their planning. I think we have a number of families who probably thought that this year was their last year to budget out for daycare and other things at a certain level. And now all of a sudden, if they were born September 15th, it changes the entire plan with not a whole lot of notice. I know a year seems like a lot of notice for most of us with budgeting. It certainly is not, especially when it comes to young children. So I know there is an appeal process, and I guess it would just be us figuring out how we expect that appeal process to work. And I think that's something that we're going to get from Troy and his admins as opposed to something we decide, but something that we also need to just sort of take a look at as we're in open session so that those parents who do need to know what's the likelihood if my child can do the basic things for kindergarten, but they were born in October, are they still going to be allowed to enter kindergarten? How, strict that's going to run.
Yeah, the regional superintendents have discussed this at length in the bigger discussion with the state. One of my superintendent colleagues just produced a Google Doc, Google Sheets, so we can all put like, what are we doing in each district? But there is some kind of consensus with Learn that hopefully we'll collaborate and come up with a similar process that other towns are to make it kind of easier. I think there is the overall feeling like in implementing this for next year in the first year that maybe there'd be some leniency to the process, the waiver process. Not completely leniency, but and then in successive years, maybe it becomes more difficult, but because of this and families not being able to plan, certainly we don't want kids into kindergarten who aren't ready. But on the other hand, they're doing that now. And so if we have kind of like a transition year next year where we're kind of like halfway to what it's going to look like, and then the following year be more stringent on that waiver process and the assessment of the child being developmentally appropriate and to kindergarten, I think that's where it's heading. But I would like to kind of wait a little bit longer, maybe communicate, and we have communicated to families like this is the new law and all that, but maybe we can continue to do that and say, look, we are developing the process, but I want to wait to see what other towns are doing so that we don't go rogue and do something totally different. So I'd like to bring a recommendation, maybe, it's over the next few months after I get more what the other towns are doing. 24 into 25. It's supposed to be implemented. You have to be age 5 by September 1st, which is more in line with the rest of the country, by the way.
And when discussing a potential appeals process, where in the discussion have you guys thought about like when would be appropriate to appeal? Would it be like April before September? Or I know you can't answer, but I mean, when kicking ideas around,
I think
would
that's
it be
a
in the
good
spring?
timeline, like that April, it probably is a good time to do those assessments for kids. But yet, of course, a lot of progress can be made over the 2 months, right?
Right.
So it's difficult. And I think that may be one of the reasons why it might be good to have kind of like a transition year where, we're following the law. And we have a waiver process, and it might be that a lot of people that fill out the waiver, their kid goes to kindergarten. It could be all of them that fill out the waiver, their kid goes to kindergarten in the first year. And then as we further develop the process, but there could be people who'll be like, hey, you know what is the law? And you know what? I am going to keep my kid home for a year because I know my kid. And I think that, they should be home for another year. And it allows parents to be supported in making that decision because the law has changed. But parents that feel like their kid needs to go, maybe the waiver isn't so tough the first year. and then we have time to further develop it. And I think that is the thought of a lot of superintendents right now around the region because of this.
And it could be that there's 3 kids that this involves,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right,
we
that's
have,
right.
we really have no.
We don't know. Yeah, and I even
in
thought
a
about like,
class of 50.
if you do this, and you're taking like, it's almost like it's 4 months of kids, September, October, November, December, right? That could be, that's 1/3 of the school year. Potentially that could be 1/3 of your kindergarten class. So then do you have only 2 kindergarten teachers and add another preschool teacher for that year when you do that, right? So we're thinking about the impact of this.
But
you
then
know?
do you move to a full-time pre-K because
Right,
of that
and do you
shift?
do it? Yeah, and so some districts are deciding to do like a transition, pre-K kindergarten class,
Mhm.
you know, as part of their
Okay.
plan, and that maybe larger districts, so,
Um,
than us. So I think Chet might be right. We might be talking about 3 kids.
And
Well,
So,
and
but
in
we
reality,
we should look at the birthdays, actually, of our preschoolers right now.
Yep.
And we could probably get an estimated number of how many
Right.
kids we're looking at.
but
Yeah.
I think
and it doesn't necessarily need to come in on this policy. This policy is mostly about, we need to change the dates for legal purposes.
Oh, okay.
right,
But we also
yeah,
need
you
to
should
have
do
this
it.
conversation.
Yeah.
right,
yeah.
we do, and
So
I
you
think,
could take the policy, you could do adopt the policy.
and you said that we're coming in line with pretty much the rest of the country here. What does the rest of the country do it as a waiver process? Like,
They don't have a waiver.
They don't,
process.
it's hard fast,
No,
okay,
Connecticut just had the waiver process, and honestly, in the superintendents, you know, it would have been much easier if they just changed the law.
Yep.
Without the waiver.
gotcha,
But honestly, maybe did it over 2 years,
right,
so you have like a transition year. Because having this waiver process really complicates it. It's kind of like a mask thing, you know, like, oh, let the districts decide what's best for them. You know, it's much easier if you just say, look, this is what you're gonna do, because then you don't have all the local debates about it, right?
I mean, it does involve the waiver process in this policy. So if you would rather wait entirely on this, I don't think it's going to. I don't know, legally speaking, if we need to at least change the date so that we have the new policy in play at this point. Perhaps somebody smarter than me knows that answer, but if we waited a couple of months before we added the new date, I don't believe that will have any sort of impact on us. So if you want to wait a couple of months, that's fine. But it is and I wanted to put it in because it is the CABE it's one of the CABE things that they brought up. That they said, make sure that you're addressing this because you have a legal change to do.
So honestly, it might be good to adopt the policy earlier than later, because it is just updated based on the new law that is in place, you know, and is going to be implemented. And it would help also to communicate it to our families. We have communicated, but it's one more way to communicate it that, hey, this change is coming up.
so I have a question, do we have any sort of record, or does the Board of Ed have any sort of record of the number of school age or potential school age kids living within district? As in families with children?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that. I mean, if they're not enrolled, we may have some because maybe they've been screened and they didn't bring them in or that type of thing, but we don't have all the kids that wanted to be in preschool.
No, no,
So we might not know some.
but I'm talking in general, like if we knew those kids that could be potentially coming in, or those families that had children that would be attending school in the next couple of years, communicating almost with them, because that's only gonna be, what, 40 families,
Yeah,
maybe?
probably.
Making them aware of that change ahead of time in addition,
Right.
putting it
Yeah,
on
that's right.
websites, putting it on
You're
town
right, They may
sites.
not be getting school notifications.
Correct, so,
Right. That's a good
in-
point.
so in some way, try to figure out if there's a way
So
to.
maybe there's, you know, maybe making.
Reach out ahead
the
of time to-
Daycares in town and just make sure they know of the change and they're communicating it to their families. Well, board members could volunteer to go knock on doors and say, do you have any young children?
I have been for the past couple of weeks.
I have to agree with that statement. I think maybe a message on our website might be really helpful because you may not get all the families who even send their kids to daycare. Just making sure that we just have a statement that that's coming or
Yeah, and I think it is on our website, but maybe we can just make it more prominent.
All right. All right, so that brings us up to the calendar. Is there more? Scheduled meetings. My only question on this is, did we want to continue to do one meeting in November and one in December? This one has 2 meetings. So, maybe we can change that to November 13th, Irma? Yeah. Or we could just leave it the first meeting of the month so that we don't step on toes of other, boards' meetings. So let's just do November 6th and scratch November 20th. All those in favor of adopting the 2020, oh, well, we need a
Yeah.
motion. Yeah,
Hold on.
Make a motion to approve the 2024 meeting schedule with the one change of removing the 20th of November.
any other discussion?
I would just like to point out that it says during 2023, the meetings will be held on right above the meeting dates. Even though it says at the top 2024 schedule,
Yeah, that's gotta be changed. Included with that motion, we can change the date of
The typo change,
typo.
You are also giving us a meeting on Valentine's Day, but.
that's all right. You must not be married very long. All right, all those in favor? Oh, Brian
there was no
sec-
sec, there was no second.
Was
oh,
no
can we get a second
I'll
on that,
second.
please? Brian seconded.
I'll
All
second
those in
Alex.
favor? Aye, opposed.
Thank
Abstained.
you, Alex.
All right. And do we have any Board of Ed comments for future agendas? All right. Any public comment? Do we have any public left? Wow, that's impressive. All right.
Motion to adjourn. Yes.
The last motion, I motion to adjourn.
Yay, all those in favor? Oh,
I'm taking my name.
all right. Did we get a second? Brian seconded. All those, in-
block?
all those in favor?
Aye.
We need the block.
Oh.
Aye.
Bye.